Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, April 10th, 2024 meeting of the Finance and Warrant Committee to order. First on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak? You first, and then Ed next. Okay. Name and address, please.
Sure. Well, I'm here. So I'm Brian Kirby, Sprague Street, Dedham TV employee, but what I say here, of course, does not necessarily represent Dedham TV nor its employees or board of directors, but I am speaking regarding something in the course of my work at Dedham TV, and I did write it down so I could stay clear. Of course, I can't see you with my reading glasses on. Sorry. All right, so you've been speaking about troubling times ahead for the town regarding revenue and expenses, and I just wanted to bring to your attention or point out that I recently hosted Massachusetts State Representative Erica Eiderhoven on Dedham TV to discuss her bill, her House Bill 2963, which is a proposed bill that would allow cities and towns the ability to mandate payments in lieu of taxes from nonprofit organizations in their city or municipality. The nonprofits affected would be healthcare institutions, universities, private schools, and some cultural institutions that own property at or valued at or more than $15 million. It would require them to pay 25% of the property taxes that would be owed if they were not exempt. Some towns already have pilot programs, but they are entirely voluntary. And this bill makes it so that if a municipality chose to opt in, payment would no longer be an option, but would become a requirement either through cash or negotiated community benefits. Currently, the exempt organizations, they can provide community benefits, but the value is solely determined by the organization, and municipalities really have no leverage. The 25% number comes from what are really essential services: fire, road repair, public safety. And generally speaking, according to her, those take up about 25% of municipal budgets and are services that nonprofits use. So it's airing now. It's also available at dedhamtv.com if you care. But right now, the wealthiest in the community pay nothing in property taxes, and the town really has no leverage because it's voluntary. Regarding some of the numbers, I don't know if you know or not, but Nobles owns about $8 million in tax-exempt residential property and about $120 million in commercial property. It would be about $3 million in property taxes for most of us, but under the generous discount of her bill, it'd be about $775,000, $800,000. There are others. To put this in perspective, the $120 million in property is not all of it. They also, they made $38 million in gross revenue, $7 million net. They're sitting on $270 million in net assets. So, they're the wealthiest in the community, and they're not paying their voluntary amount. This bill would allow Dedham, if they so chose, to opt into it. There are other schools in town in similar circumstances, net assets, lots of property, and no taxes. So I encourage, anybody that's interested to watch that or reach out to us. And if you're in support of that, email Paul McMurtry and Mike Rush and tell them you support it. It's coming up. I think the first time it died a couple of years ago, she brought it back up. It's been extended to April 30th, and I think they're voting on these things and at least discussing them late April, the 26th or the 27th. One other thing, I just wanted to extend an invitation to all of you. I know you've spoken about getting the word out, and you have things in the works, but Dedham TV is there for you. So if someone wants to come in or en masse, maybe not en masse, we're doing that here, but we are available. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Could I just ask that a copy of your notes, if you could get a copy of what?
Yeah, sure. I will email them to
Me,
Okay, great.
please,
Thank you.
and I'll distribute them.
Thank
That was very informative. Thank you. Next, Ed.
Hi there, Ed Dockham, 75 Westchester Circle. More questions than comments, since you're going to have the town manager in here discussing the budget. The room local occupancy revenues has not been published for March of this year. I was wondering or hoping that the town manager would have a update on why it has not. It's usually at the end of the quarter, and if he has any inside information on what it is for this year. Second, in the school budget meeting, Dr. Kelly indicated that the state is in arrears on the $104 per student for the emergency housing that is occurring in our town. How is, when they hopefully catch up, how is this going to be accounted for in the fiscal year 25 budget? And finally, the school budget for fiscal year '24 spent in excess of $2.6 million. $2 million of it was for transportation, as they said, and $600,000 for the additional students, mainly for the emergency housing that's been thrust on our town without any support from the state. How was the extra spending approved by which committee? If you've already handled this, this was kind of new to me when I started going through the budget information. How is the school committee allowed, they had to, but how were they allowed to just start spending an extra $2.6 million for fiscal year '24? Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? Thank you. Next on our agenda is discussion with Mike Butler, reason the statement of net position. Mike, come up. Just so, Mike Butler has a long and distinguished career in community service to the town of Dedham. Served on the school committee for a number of years, also has been on the select board, and currently chairs the Town Green Planning Committee. In addition, Mike was an appointee from the Treasurer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to the Capital, Debt, and Affordability Committee, and we served that for, I think, 6 years. Is that correct?
Yep.
So he has vast knowledge in terms of municipal finance and also on the state level. And we've asked Mike to come in, and as he's done the last couple of years, is update us on the statement of net position. And this year, we're going to look at it relative to Norfolk County communities. And he'll have some comments on the budgeting. So, thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The statement in that position, I've presented previously, I think, maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think it's an important document. We spend a lot of time talking about operating budgets, and we do a lot of benchmarking with other communities with operating budgets. So this is the one time a year where we can just do benchmarking of a type against or alongside other communities. That's why I like to put it together, just so we have an idea of how we're positioned.
If anybody, excuse me, Mike, if anyone in the audience, we have extra copies of his presentation, so if you'd like to pick one up here, please come up. I apologize, I should have said that. Thank you.
Slide 2, Doreen. So the statement in that position is a comprehensive view of the community's financial assets and liabilities. You know, we used to call it the balance sheet. That's, you know, everybody at home has a balance sheet. Communities, businesses have balance sheets. In the municipal world, it's the statement in that position filed every year on June 30th. And it can be found on the town website in the Finance Department's section for financial reports. It's a helpful gauge of the long-term fiscal health of the town. And not quite the latest update, but this slide. But it is a way to evaluate a town's approach to interperiod or intergenerational equity, and I think it should be discussed periodically. This only covers government activity, so it doesn't include sewers, water districts, things like that. Next slide. Okay, and on slide 2, I just wanted to point out the link to the town website is on the second bullet. If you go to the third page. So this year, the format for the next few slides shows on the right-hand side in the text box the 2018 numbers and the 2022 numbers. So you can see the total assets and then how that translates to per capita. And the way I do that is I take total assets, say, of 2022 of $282 million and divide it by the town's population, which is 25,000. And you come out to 11,303. And you can see Dedham is in the gold bar, and it's just above the midpoint. So as you'll see in many of the slides, we're about in the middle. We've been in the middle for several years. That's where we remain. In this one in particular, we're a little bit above midpoint. And as everybody would expect, the increase in assets is due to the new buildings that we've opened in the last 5 years. Next slide. Total liabilities. Again, in the upper right, you can see how in 2018 it was just under 7,000. Now it's about 8,800, mostly due to increase in the OPEB liability and for capital debt. Again, we're a little bit above average on that. A little bit higher this year than we were in 2018 when we were 17th. So next page. Net position essentially is the difference between assets and liabilities. There's a few more calculations that the Government Accounting Standards Board has communities go through, but basically assets minus liabilities. And you can see Dedham is in the gold bar at $2,415 per capita. There's 8 or 9 towns to the left of us. And as you know, there's 28 communities in Norfolk County, so there's about 12 or 13 to the right of that. And FYI, Dover's not included in any of these charts because their information hasn't been published yet for 21 and 22. And we only go through June 30th, 2022 because at least half of these communities, as is typical, have not yet wrapped up their review of the FY23 paperwork. So that usually takes 9 months to 15 months or 18 months to wrap it all up. That's why we're looking at 2022. Dedham's statement in that position for 2023, however, has been published. And you can see there on the text box on the right, the net position is $50 million and a per capita of $2,000. So it's dropped a bit since 2018. Okay, next page. This combines the charts from the information from slides 3 and 4 and 5. It's a bubble chart. A little complicated, but I just like to put it up here. It displays the data in a different way. So on the left side, the y-axis, you have total liabilities per capita. On the x-axis, you have total assets per capita. Then you have a dotted line, a diagonal line. So that essentially means you have a net position of 0. So if you're above that line, you're negative. If you're below that line, you have a positive net position because your assets exceed your liabilities. Dedham is the red dot. That's about as close to the bullseye as you can think, right? So it just means that over the years the decisions we've made have been very much in line with how other communities have done it. It's the way it is. We're in the middle of this chart. So, next slide. I dig into long-term liabilities because I've always been interested in that. They have a big influence on bond rating. Not only how much is outstanding, but how much we have to pay as a percentage of our annual operating budget. So it's important to weigh these, watch these carefully. So Dedham is 5th on the list. I think last year we were 4th. But not a surprise. The Finance and Warrant Committee, Town Meeting have talked about this at length. But the debt for this is related to the construction that we've undertaken the last number of years, even going back to the AV school in 2012, then ECEC and the others. So total debt in 2017 was $72 million. In 2022 was $117 million. So when you think about all the construction that's been going on, to go up $40 million, it's a lot of money, but given everything that we've invested the last 6 years, it doesn't seem to be excessive. Interestingly, when you look at how much debt is outstanding for all 27 communities in the county, back in 2017, there was $1.1 billion with the B, and in 2022, it was $2.8 billion. Now, just adjust that down by $400 million because Quincy, a few other towns have done this over the years, issued a pension obligation bond. So their pension obligation was pretty pressing. So in 2021, they issued bonds for $400 million to pay down their pension debt to 0. So in a couple of slides, you'll see Quincy's pension debt is 0. But they took on an additional $400 million in debt. So So countywide, capital debt went from 1.1 to 2.4 billion, which is really more than doubled. But when you think of it, interest rates were low. The economy was really bouncing back from 2008, 2009. So revenues were strong. And there was a backlog of capital on projects. So Norfolk County said, let's go. And the 27 communities, like Dedham, were putting a lot of money into new buildings. Next page. Now, that pension liability per capita, this was the first time I've seen it, and I've been, compiling the statements in that position for all the communities in the county since 2017. This is the first time that the statements have above the line something called a net pension asset. So it's very unusual. So Dedham for FY22 recorded a net pension asset of $641,000. So it was just slightly above zero. And for years, for every community, the liability has always been negative. There's always been a liability. So it was really something. Only Milton and Quincy were in that same situation as Dedham this year. So it's positive news. It's not the be-all and end-all. It doesn't mean we're fully funded because the actuaries have a very elaborate, complex methodology as to how you determine full funding. But it just goes to show that we're in good shape, and when you have a couple of good years of stock market returns, you get the good news like this. So as a snapshot, it does say that we were positive. I mean, Milton had a couple $1 million. Quincy actually showed multiple millions of dollars for net pension asset. And just to give you an idea of the volatility, you look at FY21, 16 million, FY23, 31 million. So it goes up and down. Remember, everybody's IRA was looking good at the end of 21. But at the end of 22, the market tanked, right? In 23, and it's rebounded in 23 and 24. So we'll see that unfold over the next couple of years. But again, good positive news. We're not fully funded, but when you're this close, when you can report a net positive asset, it means you're getting closer. And I did want to mention, too, that the pension system is managed, controlled by the Dedham Contributory Retirement System, which is an independent entity. The town has no authority over this. The town sends checks every year to the retirement board. The retirement board takes it from there. And the retirement board operates under Chapter 32, which has at least 500 pages of regulations, if not more, that determine how much money to collect, how much people pay, and then how much, and how you calculate the benefits for retirees. Next page. And like OPEB, the pension obligations are calculated every 2 years with the actuarial study. So here's OPEB. We're in the lower half of this, so we're in pretty good shape. So what does that show? So FY21, we're at 51 million. I know in a more recent actuarial study, the town adopted some more conservative assumptions that increased the liability. Next page. The next page combines all three of those long-term liabilities. You can see Dedham's in the middle at $7,800 per capita combined. So, next page. Just wanted to talk a little bit about excess tax levy and some comments on where we are with budgeting this year, next year. So, you hear a lot about excess tax levy capacity. What is it? When a community sets its levy below the limit, the difference between the actual levy and the levy limit is referred to as excess levy capacity. This is an additional amount the community could levy or choose not to levy at town meeting. So I used some recent Dedham data to give you an example of that. So last year, fiscal '23, the max levy limit was 109.9. The actual tax levy how much we raised via property taxes from residents and businesses, was 101.7. That means the excess levy capacity was 8.2 million. For this fiscal year, which was going back to last May's town meeting, the max levy was 114.1. How did you get to 114.1 versus the 109.9? Well, you can increase your max levy limit by 2.5%, that's Prop 2.5, plus new growth. And that comes out to 114.1. It actually comes out a little bit higher than that, but then you have to deduct the debt exclusion that every year declines a couple $100,000. So Prop 2.5, on average, has allowed Dedham to increase its levy limit by about 4% a year. Some years 3.8, sometimes 4.2, 3.6, generally 4% a year. So the actual tax levy increased from 101.7 to 109.6. That's what was appropriated at town meeting. That left excess levy capacity of 4.5 million. So that's because we increased spending by 7.9. Prop 2.5 allowed an increase of 4.2. So 7.9 minus 4.2 is the 3.7. Next slide. This gives some history. This is a waterfall chart that shows from 2013 to 2020 the excess levy capacity increasing. And it increased due to strong local receipts, transferring excess reserves, free cash, which used to offset the levy. There were a couple of cost reduction measures as well. 2021 and 22 was pretty level. And then the last couple of years, in 23 and 24, it's decreased 1.1 million. And then, as we just discussed on the previous slide, 3.7 million this year. Town manager's budget proposal would draw that down by about 3 million. So the last couple of years have been a real roller coaster. Everybody knows with the pandemic, inflation, local receipts took a hit. Everybody knows that. Local meals and hotel taxes, quite a big impact. And I did want to point out too, so that not only was the impact 7.8 million is shown here, but also we reduced how much money we were putting into the OPEB trust fund by $1 million. So it was really a total of 8.8 million. Next slide. Then I looked at the change in net position per capita between FY18 and FY22. Now that we have 5 years of data, we can look at some trends. And I usually do this data input January, February, March because it's a slow time of year. You know, the days are short. You know, I have a little bit more free time, and I'm happy to do it. It's fascinating to understand how different communities are making different decisions about how they organize their community and how that rolls on up into a whole bunch of financial metrics. So this was interesting too because some communities increased their net position per capita and some didn't. And Dedham's the gold bar on the far right. Dedham's net position dropped about $400 per capita. So I looked more closely at this data and then cross-referenced it with changes in excess levy capacity in these towns. So I wanted to see what was happening with excess levy capacity in those towns. So it's interesting, of the 22 communities that increased their levy capacity, 8 or 9 of them, of the 22 communities, 8 simultaneously who increased their net position per capita, 8 simultaneously increased their levy capacity. And I was going, we were in the same economic environment, you know, and I'm sure their local receipts were being impacted too. So it'll be good to sort of dig into those communities. And those communities have asterisks on them along the x-axis. So, for example, Sharon, Brookline, Avon, Canton, Westwood. all were able to increase their net position per capita and their excess levy capacity. So it's worth, having some conversations with them to say, okay, tell us how you did it. What was going on in your community? Now, conversely, we won't know for a couple of years. Conversely, Dedham may have already experienced those tough things earlier than anybody else, right? So we don't know for sure whether we're just a year or two we saw everything hit our statement in that position a year or two previous to the other communities. We'll find out. Next slide. So I just wanted to summarize on this page a lot of the conversations, newspaper articles, documents that I've surveyed. We have on the left the increase in the average tax bill. The FY25 town manager budget is looking at about 577 plus or minus. I put an asterisk there because this is, let's see, I was going to say volatile. That's probably not the best word. Maybe just really difficult to predict where we're going to end up with state aid. State aid has been pretty predictable the last few years. 3%, 3%, 3%. But state budgets have been pretty healthy the last 8 or 10 years. I can remember a couple of times in the last 20 years where state aid actually, that was approved by the legislature, actually came in lower than the governor's budget. So it was cut. So we all saw numbers from the cherry sheet and stuff. There were a couple of times, once every 10 years or so, those numbers don't make it all the way through the legislative process at Beacon Hill. And we know, for example, that the earmark for the town green was cut by 50% from $200,000 to $100,000 back in January. It's because the state's in a tough position. So we don't know what state aid is going to be. And usually you don't find out until August. Maybe we'll have some indication by then. Hope we get what they said they would deliver. Local receipts have recovered nicely. Hotel and meals taxes coming along. I also checked the hotels and meals tax on the state website yesterday because I was trying to get the most current information, but it's not available yet for March, the first quarter, online yet. So, but it's ahead. It's surpassed FY19 when you look at, I should say, if you look at the first 6 months of this year versus the first 6 months of last year, compared to 2019, we're on track to finally get back to where we had hoped to be before the pandemic. The other thing is, you just can't look at it one time. You have to look at 26. That's why we have the long-range forecasting tool. And the other interesting thing, too, is Dedham's average tax bill is ranked about 70th statewide for the last decade. Some years it's 67, some years it's 72, but it's pretty much 70 plus or minus 3 spots in the ranking. So, and then on the right side, all the different options for that are on tap that the state legislature is considering. You've read about the meals tax, the room occupancy tax, and a surcharge on the motor vehicle excise tax. So I estimated the approximate annual impact there. I think it's really complicated too, and these are some of the things that I know Leon and John and Brady are working on when it comes to next steps, because it is quite possible that you could leave town meeting in May with no excess levy capacity. Town meeting has the right to appropriate money right up to that and consume it all. We don't know. Last year, Finance and Warrant Committee, Town Manager, Select Board went ahead to say, we think it's a reasonable $500,000 decrease on both the town side and the school side. Town meeting didn't accept that on the school side. So, don't know where that's going to end up. But as soon as you have no levy capacity, now you can only increase your appropriations at town meeting by about 3.8% a year, 4%, 3.6% a year. That's it. Beyond that, you need to go back to the voters for debt exclusion or an operational override. And those are some of the things that people have to look at. The debt exclusion for the next school is probably in the vicinity of $350 plus or minus. I know they have to go through a review of that now that the student body, the enrollment for Oakdale has been dropped from this to that, right? So I think it's around 350, and Leon's working on debt exclusion for existing debt. Operational override is another option. People, if they just want to increase the operating budget, they can approve money for that. The debt exclusion is only for the life of the debt that's issued. Operational overrides are permanent. There's also an option for what's called the operational underride, where you can take the levy limit and put it to the voters. So our levy limit, say, was like 114. You could go to the vote, voters could go to the select board and say, I want to make it 112, and just cap it at 112. It would grow thereafter by that 4%, but you're knocking 2 million to 3 million off that. So, but that would go to the voters as well. So those are the main options that I see people have to consider the next several months. And then in summary, the last page. So I think the town's in pretty solid position. You know, over the years, it's made good investments. It's been prudent. We did take it on the chin the last couple of years because of external factors. Responded pretty well, I think, to it. I will say on the third bullet, it was very interesting because you saw in the waterfall chart those blue bars climbing from 2011 to 2019 on excess levy capacity. In 2018, the town engaged a third party, Clifton Larson Allen, which is a tax and accounting service firm, to memorialize that increase. We wanted to understand, well, how the heck did this happen? And we wanted a third party to do it, right, an independent set of eyes. So they gave us this report, which I'm sure many of you have seen. Very valuable to capture that. So I'm recommending that. And because it's interesting, they forecasted 19 through 21, and they were pretty close. I thought it would be interesting to have a third party take another look at it, except it would be for 2018 to 2024, not just for excess levy capacity, but for also for statement in that position. I think we have some significant decisions to make in the coming months or year, and I think to have sort of this baseline document, you know, compiled by an expert third party would be very helpful. And that's all I have.
You can take a breath now, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Mike on any of the presentations we had?
If you have any follow-up, you know, I'm around. So feel free to give me a shout.
I think the one question I have is, how do towns increase their levy capacity? What's that process?
How do they increase their levy?
Yes.
Limit? How do they increase their levy limit?
And then all of a sudden it goes to 2 or 2.5 million.
Oh, their excess levy capacity?
Yes, excess levy.
Yes, well, that's why you'd want to have the conversations. I mean, you saw how Dedham did it, right? We had reserves, like the overlay surplus 10 years ago was $4 million. I don't know what it is today, but it was really exceeded what you needed. And finally, the state said it's too much, so you move those overlay reserves. We had very, very strong receipts coming out of 2008, 2009. So we had low inflation, right? 1, 2, 3%, no, 1 and 2% for a number of years. That kept things under control too. And there was some cost cutting as well. So we went through the first round of municipal health insurance reform. That saved a lot of money for both the town and for employees. You know, and the money that we saved, the money that the town saved was used to fully fund OPEB for a number of years, yeah.
How much of the free cash figures that we had at that particular time would have affected that levy? Would it have the excess levy in any way?
Some of that free cash was used to offset the levy. I don't remember exactly how many times it was used, but it's in this document that we prepared. But that use, we tried to stay away from using free cash, as you know, to offset the levy limit. It's not good practice. It's better just to use it for capital, all the one-time stuff. Yeah.
Michael P.?
Yes, Mike, thank you. This is very helpful. The four options on page 14 of the existing Prop 2.5 options, all the debt exclusions, including one that was bantered around in earlier discussions, debt exclusion for existing debt.
Right.
Well, but all of those still, you can't hide from the net, the net position. They all would still erode the net position because it's assets over liabilities, correct? Or am I?
Yeah, I'd have to have someone run the numbers exactly. Generally, if you issue $1 of debt for a building, there's no impact on your net position, because your asset goes up by $1, you've added a building, and your debt goes up by $1 to pay for it.
Okay, then, what about specifically using the debt exclusion for existing debt?
Right, because you would be paying that annual debt service through the debt exclusion. So you're asking how that would impact the statement in that position? I don't know. But we can ask, as a follow-up, along with the other questions that were asked earlier this evening, to get an answer in writing to that.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Mike?
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Or?
Just one editorial comment. I was thinking about this before I go. I will say that over the past couple of years, I've had the sense that the approach we built in 2009, 2010 for capital with the Robin Reyes Fund and the meals and hotel tax, it's time to revisit that, in my opinion. Good strategies, in my experience, good strategies might last 5 or 7 years. On the outside, 10 years. But so much changes in that time. The environment changes, your financing, your construction costs, that it's still a good idea to rely on the meals and hotel room taxes for the funding. But I just think there's more that you have to do to fill that out, because I just sense that it's not going to be sufficient to support what we're trying to do with capital over the next 10 years. The team in Town Hall understands, and that's why they're working towards figuring that out, because you really need to put in place an approach to capital that's going to serve you the next 10 years. The Robin Reyes Fund did that in 2010. Remember the first 5 years, the advice from the finance team was just let it accumulate, just gain experience, don't touch it for the first 5 years, and we didn't. So then we started using it 17, 18, 19, 20. We know what it's going to give us now over the future. Now we have to match that up again, just as like we did back then, what are our expected capital needs, how that translates into an operating budget and to annual debt service, where we're going to get those funds. So I just wanted to mention that of the Robin Reyes Fund. I love it. It's served us well. It's been excellent to get as much done as we did without a debt exclusion, but now we have to figure out a different approach. So, okay.
Could you just touch again, Mike, just real quickly, when you mentioned, what are the mechanics with the, with the operational underride as an alternate way to control taxes?
Right. It's very rare. I think in the state, it's only been done 15 times, maybe? I mean, if you hunt and peck on the state website, eventually you find a list of underrides, and there's few of them. But it would go to the voters to say, the proposal is to reduce your maximum tax levy from this to this. Do you agree or not?
And if that's done, there's the reaction to that would be services.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why it's so rare. That's why people usually go for operational overrides, because the pressures are such. But it's not unheard of.
Okay. Anything else for Mike? As always, Mike, we appreciate very much
Yep.
you coming in and doing the work that you've done on these reports, and it'll be part of the information that we have, and we'll get this out to the townsfolk.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is we have is the discussion with the town manager regarding budget updates, including the 0.5% and 1.0 adjustments to the FY25 budget. These were requested by the Finance and Warrant Committee for the town manager and the Finance Department to come back and give us what the reactions would be, what would happen with those cuts. You got this information tonight. Does everybody have this in front of them? Okay. All right, Leon, where do you want to start? This first page here, table 1, it says?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair, Finance and Warrant Committee. So I can start with the options that we discussed, or I can start maybe with a little bit more, or I can back up and give you some answers too. I know that there were some questions about school numbers. Wherever you want to start, I can start, and we can.
I think, let's start with the school number, I think,
Okay.
at this point, okay? Because that has been a topic of conversation.
Sure.
Both, especially on the social network folks that are out there.
Yeah, no,
And the genesis of this was the fact that when members looked at what the school department request was for their fund, I'm going to not include percentages right now, just the total amount that they requested, and then the amount that the town manager had in his budget. And they were pretty close in terms of stuff. So if you could explain to us how that is moving forward and your discussions that you've had.
Sure, and I just want to apologize for any confusion that caused, because I know it has caused some confusion, and we do work very collaboratively with the school administration, and I think through this, we've learned that in future years, we're going to make sure we're starting from the same baseline numbers, and then, incrementally adjust those from there, so that, when we're presenting to you all and the public, it really is an apples to apples comparison versus, and there's no real fault, because I think everyone was using good data. It's just, we weren't all using the same data points. So, for example, I've now present is a chart here. So you have the town meeting approved FY24 budget for the schools, which is what we used when we created our comparison data for what the school had asked for and what the town manager's budget was. The school number was slightly different, and they weren't wrong, but they just didn't include the operating capital in there, so it was a different number. And so obviously when they're calculating their numbers off a different number, it creates a little bit of confusion, because they're saying it's X percent and we're saying it's Y percent, and in reality, we're all talking about the same thing. And then I think for further clarification, while the end number is very close, there were some moving pieces. And so you can see, we broke it down between Dedham Public School education and Dedham Public School facility. Town meeting votes a bottom line budget, so it's composite. But the way we always look at it is two separate operating lines there. So the school presented FY25 request was slightly higher than the town manager recommended for the education only line, but the facility line, which was recommended by the school department, was lower than the town manager recommended line. And when you build the composite together, they're only about $6,000, $56,000 different. So I guess that's my explanation for that. We were all on the same page. We've been working together. Again, like I said, it's very collaborative. We work well with the school department, with Superintendent Murphy and Dr. Kelly and others. But I think it didn't owe an explanation as to how we ended up at the end. And the net result is the same. What the schools have been saying this impact will have on their budget is accurate. And we're all dealing with the same numbers, so I think we're all on the same page with regard to that. It's just how we present them.
Questions? Liz?
Michael.
If I may. So the school gets to 8.06 with these numbers in the middle column plus the 155 for operating capital.
Yes.
So your number in the far right column, where's the operating capital?
On the far right cap,
The town presented FY '25, far right of the chart.
so it would be slightly higher than 8.06.
Okay. My concern, well, one, I need.
Sorry, Brady's, what's the question again? Can you ask the question?
Ray, do you want to come up? Because they can't, if you're
So I
talking.
think there was a miscommunication there. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying to get apples and apples, because at the school public forum.
Yep.
The superintendent said that you were recommending lower, but you're not. And I think we really need to clear that up before town meeting. The way we can grasp.
Sure. So I recommended lower in the education-only line. I recommended more in the facility line. And the composite, which is what town meeting votes on, is slightly higher than what the school department had recommended. Now, it is lower than a level service budget, which is what our initial discussions were many months ago. So it would be, and you can assume that the operating capital from FY24 is included in all of these comparison numbers here. So the percentages are accurate here as far as, so the town manager recommended budget is higher than the school department requested budget.
Do you want to try again, or do you want me to try?
You try.
So, okay.
So I have a few comments, but first to finish her thing here. So I get that the 7.75 is apples to apples with the 7.85. What I think Liz is asking is, since the school has been talking about this 8.06 because they forgot operating capital, I think she's looking for what your percentage would be equivalent to that 8.06. And I think that's what you just said, slightly higher.
It would be like 1/10 I think,
Yeah.
higher.
So,
So, because the 7.75 is equivalent to the 8.06. So if the 7.85 proportionally, it's
really close.
very close.
Yeah. So, well, should I keep going, or do you,
Keep
are you
going,
still
please.
going? So many things. What's it going to look like in the budget book? In the town meeting warrant book? Are they going to see this 7.75 and 7.85? Like are these lines separate, the education and the facilities line?
Yeah, they're separate, but then in the town meeting book, if you remember, it rolls it up and it's DPS school, and then I believe there's regional school, and then it's total schools, I think is the way it gets.
And the
all rolled
operating
up.
part is somewhere totally different.
What was that?
And the operating part is somewhere totally different, the operating capital?
No,
Or-
that's embedded within the facilities budget there.
Okay. So,
And there's a little bit of operating capital in the education line too, so it's both.
Okay.
So it's all operating, because this is all operating budget here.
right, okay. And then, in terms of the differences between you and the schools, how does this limit them? Like, they can't move money between education and facilities, or they can?
They can based on the way town meeting votes. My understanding is that they can. They may have internal controls that would limit that,
Right.
but
So really, I guess I'm wondering how important it is that you cut the education part and not the facilities, because if what town meeting is voting on is the total of all of it, they really can then do what they want between the two.
that's my understanding.
Okay. And in that total, you're actually giving them more than they asked for.
That's correct.
Okay. So, like, that solves it for me, but and I know you know this, but I just don't know how the heck we get, because just days ago, right, people are saying, like, official people in town are saying that, the schools asked for this, and the town manager is cutting that, by a percentage, and finance committee is probably going to cut it even more, so everyone is ready to fight. You're actually giving them more than they asked for, I think is the reality.
Bottom line, yes.
Yes, okay.
We
So I don't know how we
roll
get
back
that
the
word out
perception From
there.
the other night.
Yeah, it's a mess,
Easily.
yeah.
I mean, I think what that will take is perhaps us working with the school department to say, you know, that they can use the funds at the bottom line level to do what they're saying they're going to be able to do with their budget, which does include reductions. I mean, they've talked
Oh, yeah.
about, they've
No, I know.
quite
I
openly
know.
about what the reductions are. I don't think that those reductions were based on the town manager recommendation. They weren't based on what we had. I don't think they're based on anything else. So it's an honest and transparent answer based on these numbers. We can say that that's what the recommendation would lead to. If people are okay with that, then they're okay with that. If town meeting's not okay with that, then they'll adjust it. But I think that the bottom line is that the schools and the town have a similar understanding as to what's happening with the funds. But we certainly can do a better job explaining that, I think, to the town meeting and to everyone else. If there are additional questions, you should send them our way and we can try and clarify before we have additional discussions on this. I'm happy to try and do that.
Michael, you're next.
Thanks, Leon. Just a quick question about the $155,260 in operating capital that was not included in the school department request. Is that an anomaly, or has that happened? Do they do it that way all the time?
I think it was probably an anomaly. I don't, again, we always just look at what town meeting voted, and the school department has a different accounting, they actually have a completely different accounting software package that they use internally. So with the town, we're using Munis, they're using something different. We take what town meeting votes and we put that into Munis, and we have certain controls around that. They have a separate set. So I think perhaps when they ran their report, it just didn't encapsulate everything that was voted by town meeting, and that's probably how it happened, but I'm sure that they could give you a more detailed answer to that.
Well, I only ask because, in the 5 years I've been sitting here, I don't remember having a discussion such as this about any differences. So if it was just, a one-time mistake, I see that and we can explain it the way we need to. But I just wanted to make sure that this isn't something that has gone undetected over time.
I think it's come up a couple of times over the years. I know.
Okay.
So I think that there's a learning lesson from it, in that it's important for us and the schools at the very beginning part to agree on what our baseline is, because it's always, again, it's not come down to any real difference. What it's come down to is, the school used the revised budget, which is valid because that's maybe what town meeting voted in the fall, versus the town used the original budget, which came from spring town meeting, and what causes some discrepancies when you're creating percentages. I think that happened my first year here, and it's happened a handful of times where we've used a different baseline number and therefore put out different percentages, and it caused a little bit of confusion.
Okay. Well, I don't remember the
Yeah.
confusion being at this level,
Yeah.
if that qualifies or quantifies what I said. So.
But certainly, I think, we can always do better.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. So I think the impression is that your recommendation, the town manager's recommendation, results in additional cuts in school staff. And you're saying that it doesn't change it from what they have already proposed?
That's my understanding, and again, if I'm incorrect, I will confirm that with the school department, but in our most recent discussions, they have been making decisions for next year based on the recommendation, the number from the 558, 234, which is the town manager number, and when they're talking about the impacts next year, they've been using that number. I believe we're all on the same page, but I will confirm that.
Okay. Okay, I guess, I'm good.
We can move back. Okay.
Yep.
Kevin?
Just on the question of being clear with town meeting, I mean, it strikes me that we should be absolutely clear on the answer to the question of can they move facilities money and operating money back and forth? And if the answer is yes, then the legally significant thing is just the total number, because they can do whatever they want with it, if in fact that's firm. The problem with that, which is nothing that anybody can do about, given the state law, I think, is that the temptation would always be to just defer maintenance, not do personnel changes and kind of kick the can down the road, which is, not peculiar to the school department or anybody else. It's just human nature that, but, the main point is just, if in fact it's the bottom line number, that's the only thing that's legally significant, that's what we should do with whatever backup, people want to provide, but make clear that it's just backup. Thank you.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Adding on to both of those, and that's where the one way I could see them saying that you're asking for more cuts, right, is to just look at that education line. And so that's valid. But it still seems like, given this, that's really their choice. Right? And I don't see, it doesn't seem to me, but I could be wrong, that even just looking at that education line, that difference is not anywhere near like a whole percent, or what's been characterized in all the discussions out there. So it seems to me to be like a miscommunication between town and schools, because that's what it seems to me, yeah.
Because getting to Kevin's point, I mean, the school committee, schools have fiscal autonomy. So their education budget is wrapped up and also with their facilities, not their capital projects, but their facilities.
Exactly, because this is operating. When we're talking about all this, is all operating,
Operating, not capital.
whether it's education or
Right.
facilities.
So when town meeting votes, and what they will vote on is their education plus facilities, bottom line. And then if that's approved, then that's the school department's position. They move forward with that. And then they have, under the autonomy, they have the flexibility to use funds to address any issues that are in front of them.
And to be clear, if, for example, if the town meeting approves a bond for $1 million for a roof, that's a capital project and cannot be used and can't be
Yes.
moved around at all. That's completely
Just want to make that, yeah, that's very important, because in the facility aspect, capital is different, and they have to spend it on those.
on those specific capital projects that are identified.
So just to be clear, and for anyone that's watching, the school department presentation was $58,502,252, correct? And the town manager's recommendation is $58,558,234, which is an increase about more than what the school department has requested. And the percentages are a 7.75 for what the school department has requested, including facilities, and the town manager's is 7.85, including facilities.
And just to be clear, we did not arbitrarily increase the number either. This was based on conversations that we had joint with the school department and with the facilities department to, and especially the DPS facilities line, because we obviously have a new director there. There were lots of moving pieces with that budget, and information was changing. So that's how that's how that evolved. It wasn't arbitrary.
And just to make this abundantly clear, that you have had discussions with Dr. Kelly and the superintendent, and they understand what is being presented to us tonight. Have they seen a copy of this?
Yes. I believe, was that sent over tonight? I had a conversation earlier today with Dr. Kelly. I explained the table.
Okay.
I went over the numbers with him, and I advised them that we would be sending over the same table, and so they will have it in their hands tonight, the same thing that you're getting tonight.
Okay.
But again, we went through it in detail today, and we're on the same page.
You have a question?
No, I just want to make sure that people know the updated numbers and that they're not stuck on what was presented to the community previously.
just a few days ago.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
That's
that,
I'm just really nervous about that.
I think there's a concern, think we all have, is the presentation and how the presentation that the school department is putting forward needs to be tweaked, adjusted, so that now we have apples and apples, to coin a phrase that one of my colleagues here came up with, rather than apples and oranges.
No, yeah, that there's no beef.
There's no, and what we do want to have is no bananas. If we end up with bananas, we're in trouble. But, yes, so, all right if I reach out to Dr. Kelly tomorrow? Is that okay with everybody? I'm going to make that call, and just follow up on this. Just so everybody is hearing the same thing. This is a critical time, as we had the presentation just now. That's from Mike, and again, they're looking also at, and included in their request is reduction in force. So, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
So we can move to the other budget updates, but I guess I can share a bit of good news, and to answer Mr. Dockham's question, we did recently receive, even though it's not posted on the state website, we did receive the information for the local receipts for rooms and meals, the March payment. That amounts to a little over $660,000. That was not included in the budget or Article 6 for Robin Reyes. So that will, now that we have those funds on hand, we can use those. That will, we can, if it's the desire of the Finance and Warrant Committee and town meeting, we can use those funds to offset the debt payments. And what that will do is that will, by implication, lower the levy number.
Yeah.
Which at a little over 660,000 would be almost the 0.5% that you had talked about. We didn't put that in the memo or anything like that, but that is an action that it's already available to you all if you so choose to do that. You understand, or is there questions about that?
Just, is
Sure.
that what you would recommend?
That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, okay.
So we look at an impact on the proposed plus or minus $577 increase to the average residential taxpayer would, if we're applying this money, these funds, I mean, would reduce that $30, $40?
$55, something like that, just a little bit below.
Because we operated $1 million was so much on the tip, but that's changed now.
Each 0.5% reduction, as we put in the memo here, which is $689,000, reduces the tax bill by $59 annually. So if we're talking 95% of that, something like that, so it's going to be in the $55, $56 range probably.
So we went from 577 to 515.
Yeah, or less, a little bit less, yeah.
Everybody understand? Mm-hmm. I'm glad you do. I'm still doing it. Michael P.
Thanks. Just a point of clarification, though, on that. That's a revenue item. We got more revenue, which is good news. We'll
Good news.
apply it,
Exactly, yep.
And we'll get the benefit from
Yep.
that reduced levy. But I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, that that's not going to impact the budget reductions that we're talking about.
It does
That
not,
would be
no.
above and beyond that.
That would be above and beyond. That's a separate, I mean, it's, it's the other side of the ledger.
All right.
It's a revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
So we had good news.
Yes.
And our goal is to increase those revenues in the future because I think our message has been, we are trying to deliver the same level of service, but at a greatly increased cost, largely due to external factors. If we can increase revenues and offset those increases in cost to the residents, we think that that's what's best for everyone because that's what most people want. If they're, if you're paying a $9,800 tax bill or something in that realm, you want to make sure you're getting the same level of service that you got last year, hopefully. And whereas with most of these reductions, you wouldn't get that. With that, I'm happy to go through it. So
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Okay. One more question relative to the hotels. There's been a lot of discussion relative to the international folks in the hotels and the aspect of payment to the Robin Rays. But this figure that we have in front of us doesn't, that's just the folks that were there prior to or whatever? This doesn't reflect any payments.
It does not. We received payments for the first 90 days of the stays. That was the state's concessions. They paid for 90 days, the first 90 days. More recently, the state adopted a formula that compared 2023 numbers to 2024 numbers. And if a community, if your gross receipts were lower than in 24 than they were in 23, they're making up the difference. You can tell by this data here that we're not. We're well ahead.
Yes.
And so as a result, we don't qualify for that reimbursement under that program. Several other towns are in the same position, Foxborough and others within.
Stoughton,
A number who do have, I believe Foxborough's only hotel is now 100% occupied by emergency housing. And, but because of some, reasons beyond their control, they brought in enough money, they were not.
A year ago.
Exactly. And so they didn't qualify either, is my understanding. So a number of us have started having conversations with the Mass Municipal Association, with folks at the state, to try and see if we can amend the formula. Because a simple, comparison like that doesn't take into account the fact that many of us were still rebounding from COVID and the downturn in 23.
That's what I was thinking.
And, the trend lines would show that we should be well ahead. So, and as Mr. Butler said, we're now just getting back to where we were in 2019. The state should recognize that, in our opinion, and hopefully we can come up with a better formula that will lead to reimbursements to the town for their emergency housing. Okay. We'll see.
Michael Peep?
Yes, thank you. Leon, you just mentioned this, and I took it as a note from Mr. Butler's presentation about, ways that we could help ourselves, financially by increasing fees and use taxes, specifically the meals, room and occupancy, and the vehicle excise tax. I remember talking about that last year. Did we ever increase those, or if not, what would it take to make those increases?
Well, that would require legislative change, so that there are provisions in current proposed legislation that would allow us at a local level to adopt higher rooms and meals, local taxes. That would be an action that we would have to take once the state authorizes us to do so. They have not authorized us to do so.
Yeah. Okay.
That's under the category, they come out of local options?
Yeah,
Is what they
exactly.
would do?
And I believe that would be under that,
Because I think it was in the governor's budget, and I don't, the state, the House's budget came out, what, last week, or?
well, yeah, the state, the House and the Senate have both released supplemental budgets, and I don't think it's in that.
No.
I'm not sure if it's in it was in the Municipal Empowerment Act, I believe is what it's called, from the governor, but I'm not sure where that's.
So that's a TBA right now in terms
It
of
is,
that option.
yeah. It's an option, and we certainly hope that the state will put more arrows in our quiver, and then we can choose to do what we want to do as a community, but they haven't given us that tool yet.
Okay, just so that's clear, so, okay. All right, any other? Okay, let's move forward on to the report that we have, FY '25 budget reduction options.
Okay, so.
And just so anybody's watching, we had, again, I will say it again, we had requested a 0.5 scenario and then a 1.0% scenario.
And just to be clear, this is a little bit different than the exercise we did last year, where last year we reduced to make an impact on the average single-family tax bill by certain percentages. This year, you asked us to reduce the operating budget by 0.5% and 1%. So the 0.5% equates to about a little over 689,000. The 1% equates to almost 1.379 million. Each 0.5% reduction, so that $689,000 would lower the projected average single-family tax bill in FY '25 by $59 annually. So that's a little less than $15 per quarter.
Which is about what percent? Do we know that?
You know what? I don't have in front of me what percent it is. I think it's a little bit less than 0.5%. We can run that number for you as well.
I think John's on top of that right now.
So we created 2 tables for you all. The first option, option 1, which is the 0.5% reduction, and that would actually be slightly exceed the 689. One option would be, and this is, again, not a good option, but it's an option, would be to further reduce the OPEB contribution. It's not statutorily required. It's a best practice and certainly something we're striving to do, and our policies reflect that. We're currently recommending a $750,000 payment. This would reduce that down. It would be well below what our recommended amount would be. And it could impact our future bond rating. We don't know, but that is one factor that they look at when the ratings agencies look at the town, is how well we are adhering to our policies and funding our future liabilities. So that's an option. We are proposing to fund an IT project via a grant. That would save almost $20,000. I talked to DPW Director Joe Flanagan. He typically hires a number of part-time temporary workers in the summertime, and these folks, typically younger folks, are out mowing and doing various groundskeeping things to keep the town beautiful, and they do make a big impact around town. He is proposing that we could remove that line item. We would depend on our year-round staff in that case. There would likely be a reduction in level of service, but we would save almost $100,000 by that action. And then debt service, this is actually a number that we will realize one way or the other. We went out to bid on our bond offering. We're projecting that the actual number is about $75,000 less than what we had projected for next year, so we can reduce that down and save ourselves $75,000 on our debt service for next year.
Because our projected debt service for the FY '25 is 13 million, a little?
So it would reduce that number by $75,000 based on the actuals.
Okay. Which saves money in the future, debt service too.
Yeah. Any questions about the option table 1?
Just 2 things. One is, and I know we all know this, but we should be careful about the terminology we use, because there are people listening in. We're going to be talking to town meeting, that we really need to be careful about not describing, if a department asks for an 8% increase and we're recommending a 7, it's not a cut.
Right.
It's a 7% increase.
Right.
And it makes a large, and the flip side of that is, if we proposed an 8% increase in the average residential tax bill, and we find a way to get it to 7.5, it's not a half-point savings on your tax bill. It's minimizing the rate of increase. And, again, we do this all the time, so we're familiar with it, but somebody listening in could easily misunderstand it.
Very good point,
And feel
Kevin.
like they've been misled, in some cases. The other thing is on the things you've recommended, and let me preface this by just saying I appreciate how hard this is and all the work that you folks have put into this. But the OPEB contribution, for example, doesn't do anything for us next year or the year after the year after. We're just not paying the credit card bill this month. We're just kicking the can down the road. We still owe the money. It's not going to go away. And that's $500,000 out of the $691,000. And then the debt service thing, while welcome news, it's an accounting adjustment. And again, that's not a reduction. So the only thing that's really, one is, of the 4 things, the software and system sounds like it's an actual savings because we've offloaded the cost to whoever's giving us the grant.
Yep.
So that's a positive. And then the temp workers is a service reduction. So out of the 691,000, in terms of the effect next year, I mean, the fundamental problem that I think we have a level service cost for the schools, for the town, and if we take what we're doing now and just roll it forward, it's going to be 7 or whatever % next year, and the year after, and the year after. And the conclusion is that that's not sustainable. So we can do, and we've done this in the past, gimmicks and free cash and things to minimize it this year, but it just rolls forward the problem and it multiplies over time. So the problem is, somebody's got to figure out how to reduce the size of that, the cost of that, even if it may not be level service, it may be reduced services, but, and the temptations to kick the can down the road, things like this, or to look for additional revenue sources that are going to come out of the same pocket that's paying the property tax, are things that we need to avoid. You know, it's one thing, the hotel and meals tax, because it's people from all over, sort of spreads the burden around town. But when we're looking at fees for, to get rid of your trash or those kinds of things that fall directly on the same, or the stormwater fee comes in same pockets that the property tax bill comes for. So I don't know what the answer is, but those are the kinds of things that we need to zero in on. And the problem is, if you look at the math, it comes down to people over time in terms of eliminating positions or some other structural change. But again, I just want to highlight that the one-time fixes aren't going to get us out of this, I don't think.
Thank you, that's a good point. And I should have made this, we're not talking about the budgets as they exist now. We're looking at adjustments, modifications, my word, to the increases that have been proposed. Okay? And folks who are watching, hopefully that is clear. Any other questions for Leon on the 0.5% reduction that we have in front of us?
Can I just follow up on what Kevin just said? Well, I totally understand everything that you said. The whole kicking the can down the road thing, maybe I'm seeing things, glass half full. I know we've been through difficult times the last couple of years. In your professional opinion, do you think there might be a time when the kicking the can down the road might stop and we might, with inflationary adjustments, evident, that this might kind of level off and, settle to a point where things are sustainable? I mean, that's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, no,
but
that's a tough question. So
Yeah.
What we know is that we do have a structural problem in our budget, in that our projected operating increases are going to exceed our projected revenue increases. So while things may not be as bad as they are currently with the inflation so high, and that really has been what has impacted us the most coming out of the pandemic, is that the cost for our goods and services, that personnel is a great majority of our budget. And we had some very favorable contracts over the last 3 years that have helped us to a large extent. But then the other part of our budget that's significant is outside vendors and goods. And those things have skyrocketed. Joe Flanagan can give you a lot of examples about, even things simple like granite, which is still coming from the same quarry in Vermont, but it's like 10 times more expensive now. And why is that? Well, that's just the market for these kinds of things. So we're doing the best to mitigate that, but at some point, without increasing our budget, we are going to get less services, and we need to try and decide what less services we're going to get. So the OPEB contribution, I absolutely agree, it is kicking the can down the road. That's a liability that we're going to owe. If we kick it to next year or the year after, is it going to forever harm us? No. Is it a good practice? Absolutely not. Well, do I hope, and do I, all the things that I read indicate that inflation is being tamed, that the Fed believes that we're approaching that soft landing that they've been talking about for a couple of years, and that they may even start kicking down some of the rate increases and things like that? I hope so. But again, I guess I can't give you a really confident answer that if you were to do that, things are going to get so much better that we can reverse and be fine next year, because I'm pretty sure we're going to be having similar discussions next year, absent us adjusting revenue significantly.
Thanks.
Sorry, that's not the answer.
No, I guess, like I said, I realize things, it's a perfect storm. And, how we weather it is, going to be, the story that, we all tell a few years from now. So I hope we can weather it with the least impact possible. But again, that's not a question that we can answer right now because, to your point, we don't know, so.
And another factor, as you mentioned, just next year, whatever, is the fact that that excess levy capacity is not going to be there, which we have used for 5 to 6 years now, at least.
Well, actually,
Excess levy.
yeah, I mean, we started using it
2022.
3 years ago, and then, and we knew that the trend was that, again, the budget was increasing at a greater rate than what Prop 2.5 plus new growth would allow. We need to adjust for that. Some of the proposals have been, for example, the trash fee, but we recognize that those will come from the same pockets. But it's just, without those kinds of fees, we are looking at reductions. And so I guess that gets us to the second table, which that's where we're at now. Absent, I hate to call them gimmicks, but absent the gimmicks, which are the one-time sort of savings that we could recommend, you're looking at people and services. And that's the unfortunate situation. Same place that the school department is in, where even with the 8-ish% increase, we're talking about reducing positions. On the town side, we're in the same position. There's just not a level of discretionary spending that we wish there was. We budget, pretty tight every year, and it's gotten more tight over the last several years. And we're at a point where, with a reduction like this, what we're proposing would be to hold open vacant positions, because again, I would really hesitate to eliminate filled positions, just because that's someone's livelihood, and but it's no less harmful to our operations to do it this way, perhaps more so, in that these are vacant positions we're hoping to fill. But obviously, if that's the direction the town meeting makes, we will make do, but it will have an impact on services and what residents get.
Do you want to let Leon start and go down the list of the 1% at this point, and then we can catch up? Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Leon. Option 2, which is 1% reduction, or $1,379,227.
Sure. So that includes all the reductions in option 1. And then the next line is related to the summer temp help. We don't have enough vehicles to actually just give the summer help vehicles, so we end up renting vehicles every year. So that we would estimate that if we don't have summer help, we will rent about $10,000 less in trucks for them to drive around. The next line is police department. There was a line item for wildlife removal that was increased a couple of years ago. We have not used that line, so we're suggesting that we could reduce that one because the need for service has gone down. We have a very, very good animal control officer who I'm sure you're all aware of, who's very proactive, and so I think we've been able to defer that cost so we could reduce the budget and hopefully not have a significant impact. IT, we can reduce operating capital by $11,600. That would reduce their original request, and we'll make do with that. It just means that we will have less capital to purchase IT equipment, but again, we could make do with that and stretch the life of existing equipment. And then the next line, it begins where we're holding open currently vacant positions. We currently have a tax and treasury clerk position open in the tax collector's office. Those are the folks who are processing payments, interacting with residents, making various payments, making deposits, and all things of that nature. It would be our preference to fill this job. What would occur if we don't is that there will be likely longer wait times at that window during the busiest seasons. Folks may wait longer on the phone, and we really do make a great effort to process payments in an effective manner, and it likely would be delayed. But That's what would occur in that case. Facilities, we have a vacant town custodian position that covers 3 buildings. It's vacant. Currently, we're covering that with overtime for other staff, so there is a cost to that. But if we didn't fill that position, we would either continue to fill it with overtime, or we would potentially contract out that service. It would, but there is an impact. Senior planner, that's a position that's been vacant for some time. We've honestly struggled to recruit for this position. It's a very much, I think, needed position though in town. We're about to finally come with our new master plan. We'll have an implementation schedule on that. This position would be instrumental in helping us implement the master plan and a variety of other initiatives. But that is another vacant position. Public Works Department has a small equipment operator position that's vacant, and we also have a foreman position that's vacant. Again, our Public Works Department does a lot with a very small staff. We talk about this, I think, every year at budget season, but these are 2 vacant positions as well. Youth Commission has an admin position that's vacant that we could potentially hold open. Again, there would be adverse effects there as well. It's a small department, and each person really counts there as well. Library has a program librarian position vacant. Again, our library, as the director, Amber, indicated, we are doing very well in our libraries. We're increasing our metrics, and I think we do a lot of good in the community, and this would certainly have an impact on some of that good that we can do, but again, it's a vacant position. And then the last line there is an estimated health insurance savings that would be associated for all of those positions if you were to hold them open. Any questions?
Michael B.
I think you answered it. My question was, are these vacant positions going to be eliminated, or are they just going to be postponed to next year? And if they are being postponed to next year, doesn't that just, again, it kicks the can, and we're going to be revisiting this problem again next year?
I think these positions exist because there's work to do. So my preference would be to continue to advocate to fund them, but one town meeting doesn't bind another, so they could be not funded this year, and a future town meeting could fund them, but I think that would end up being an annual discussion.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Mike?
Yeah.
Kevin?
I'm assuming that the OPEB, 500,000 that you originally proposed, includes 2 pieces. One is sort of dealing with the projected increases in health insurance over the upcoming years, and secondly, paying down, I'll call it the principal, that there's sort of, one's just a tread water number, so that it doesn't get worse, and the other actually starts reducing our indebtedness. Do you have any sense what that split would be, or is that something that could be determined?
Yeah, we can give you a report on that. This is the OPEB liability number, and the other OPEB number we fund annually, but let me, I can give you a breakdown between those 2.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, on the facilities town custodian rover, you mentioned that it's currently vacant and being covered by overtime. So, is there really savings in keeping this vacant? Like, even with the overtime, is there savings?
I can get that for you. I believe that there would be a savings there anyway, but again.
But probably not as much as what is shown here.
And it's dependent on us having folks who are willing to take that overtime. So there is a service consistency problem there, but we can certainly, I can get that number for you as to what the difference is between overtime and the full-time position with benefits. And we'll probably get an explanation from the facilities director as to what the realistic long-term view is about using that level of overtime on a consistent basis.
Michael?
Leon, I had a question about, actually, it's kind of a piggyback on what Mike P. asked. As far as these positions that are currently vacant, and keeping them open and not, deleting them. I mean, I don't think keeping them open is kicking the can down the road because we're not paying salaries or benefits. And to your point, the work needs to be done at some point. But my question regarding that is, if indeed there is a movement to, drop these positions from the roster, are there any union implications? Are there any approvals that need to be received from the union?
We would need to notify the union and work with them, but because they're vacant positions, it's a little bit easier.
Okay.
But
I'm just concerned about somebody who is left in a spot that used to have two and now it only
Yeah.
has one, and wait a minute, grievance time.
There would be some necessary discussions that would have to occur. Obviously, we can't overburden our remaining workers, so I think that that's why you end up with a level of service impact, because you can't say, okay, person A, you're gonna do twice as much work because person B is gone. No, what ends up happening is they work their 37 and a half hours a week, and they're gonna do their best, and we've got really good employees. We'll probably do a little extra. But we can't expect them to do the work of two people. That would be a problem.
And if I can ask one more question. I'm curious, I use the electronic payment service myself for, the bills for my residents. Is there a lot of usage townwide for that service that you're aware of? And if so, what is the impact on the activity in specifically the tax collector's department?
I don't know that number, but I'm sure John and Annette may be able to help with that. That is an initiative we are undertaking throughout the town, though, both as a service to residents to try and make, so that's with the OpenGov. So we have the building permits are online now, so in theory, that should diminish some of the counter time and administrative time that's spent on that. And we're expanding that to all departments currently. And so even, all the licenses and things like that we're processing in the town manager's office will be on OpenGov. Hopefully there'll be savings in the long run, but we need residents to adopt that, and then and residents and businesses. Over time, could that have some impact on need? Absolutely, but we haven't perfected that yet. We haven't gotten there yet, but.
Well, I'm looking at it as well from the standpoint of if indeed there are service delays as a result of whatever might happen, that would be my recommendation. Go there. It's real easy, and it's less than a postage stamp. So anyway, I'm not trying to simplify it, but I mean, that to me is a solution that might be offered to residents who are, don't want to wait in line or whatever. So thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. The position of senior planner, how long has that been vacant?
Close to 6 months, I think. I can get you the exact date on that, but it's been a significant amount of time. There are 4 or 5 of those positions currently vacant in surrounding communities, and we're all struggling with recruitment. There's just not a lot of folks with that job skill looking to work in municipal government for that amount of money. Unfortunately, I think the private sector is really outcompeting us right now, and that's a tough market.
So just to be clear, under option 2, which is the 1%, it's, as I mentioned, $1,379,227, and that includes the 0.5 from above.
Yes.
So that's the total figure for the two combined. The wildlife removal, do we have, I read somewhere, or correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a collaborative effort with Westwood for sharing?
We do, yeah. We have a memorandum of agreement with Westwood so that our animal control officer is providing some services to Westwood. Westwood handles their animal calls a lot differently than Dedham does, though in the first instance. Their police handle many of them. So you can, I think, whereas our animal control officer is covering, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's something like 5,000 calls on the town of Dedham side. There's like 40 calls on the Westwood side. It's like, it's very skewed. And it's because their police department is handling it.
And that's a per diem, so is that the way it's handled in terms of the financial?
They are giving us, paying for a stipend for that. So-
Stipend, okay. Couldn't amount to much, though.
No,
There's not
it's
much.
a low dollar number, and it's relatively low time.
Okay. Any other questions on what we have in front of us?
Wish I had better news.
Well, this is the beginning of the reality
Yeah.
check for the town. This year it's starting, and I dare say that it, depending on certain factors, could be a much larger input and impact, I should say, in the FY26 budget. Kevin?
I may have missed this, I apologize if I did. Are we going to be hearing from the schools on a similar response to the 0.5%, 1%?
No, my understanding was that you all had thought that the schools had made their reduction, so this was our attempt to meet your goal from the town side only.
So there's nothing active
No.
asking the schools to do next?
I'm not sure that was what we said. I think the message that we asked was from your proposed budget in the totality, what a 0.5 and a 1% would be. And similar to last year when both the municipal component and the education component came in. So there was no outreach to the school at this point.
I did have a conversation with the schools, and I can tell you that the schools, because they're already eliminating positions with their budget that is proposed, that the answer from the schools was that they would end up eliminating more positions. So it seems sort of redundant to add more positions to the list of cuts. I guess you can, if Finance and Warrant Committee or Town Meeting wanted to split it, I think you could just assume that schools cuts would equal positions and town side would equal.
It would affect FTEs then.
Yeah, exactly.
Kevin?
I guess it's hard, though, for this body to make a decision on whether to do a half, nothing, one, without a sense like last year, they gave us a read. This is what, not that they were bound by it, but that our intent would be if you make us take this cut, we're going to have to do this. And to not have a response on that just makes it harder to assess anything.
Because last year we put almost a dollar amount. It was $1 million, and it was 500,000 from the municipal, 500,000 from the education area.
But they projected that they'd have staffing impacts, but it would be.
They did come back. As I recall, they said they would not affect class sizes, but it would affect 5 to 7 personnel at that point, so. Michelle?
So what I believed we had asked of Leon was to give us the 0.5% reduction and the 1% reduction, him looking at the entire budget, town and schools, so that he could come back to us with just town like he did, or a combination, or whichever. And I think the assumption was that he would come back with just town because of what the schools had already done.
But this isn't 0.5% of the entire budget. This is
Yeah,
0.5%.
Yes,
Oh, it is.
yes, it is.
0.5% of the entire, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, yes.
That's what I missed. Okay.
So the request that we have out there is affecting, as I say,
Got
a
it.
municipal component, I'll use that word,
Great, thank you.
of the budget, so. Mike?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this question, but as I'm looking at both of these, options, one thought came to mind, as far as considering the options, mixing and matching, some from one and some from the other, from the standpoint of a final decision.
When you say some from what?
Well, in other words, the OPEB contribution, the kicking the can down the road, might that be something we not consider, yet everything else within that option, and then select from option 2, I guess, or are we just limited to what's in option 1?
You are not limited. I think we broke it down, option 1, option 2. Again, this is all impactful, but in our estimation, the option 1 options were less impactful to services, whereas option 2 impacts services more. But it's certainly within this body's powers to pick from any of these or outside of this. I mean, and if you have questions, let us know. And then ultimately, town meeting will vote. we just gave you those two lists
Okay,
based
sure.
on sort of our priority, but it's up to you all to
Well,
choose.
I say that because of the implications of the OPEB, or the lack thereof a contribution.
Yeah. You could reject that and take the others and
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Smorgasbord, which is
Charcuterie
poor
board.
choice of words on my part, because we're talking about people's livelihoods.
We are.
So I apologize.
Yeah.
Michael?
You know, putting aside that some of these things aren't permanent, you know, reductions, OPEB being one, and even the vacant positions, what is the benefit, though, if we take the full 1.4 million reduction, is it lowers the base next year when we go into the budget. And it forces us to take hard action next year. So that, I see that as the benefit, you know, by having a lower base, 5% on a lower base, you know, it's certainly not going to make it any easier next year, but it forces us to continue this process of finding ways to structurally change the finances in the town. So that's the one benefit I see of going with the full 1.4 million.
The downside is it makes us cross the line into override territory by even more, so that it's not our choice anymore.
Well,
It's that if
we don't take the hard
Right,
actions
if you
next
don't
year.
take it
Yeah,
hard
yes,
enough.
correct.
You run into an override
Yeah, yeah.
situation. So you sort of, it's a little bit, you know, holding a gun to your own head, make yourself do the right thing.
But you're delaying the bullets.
Yeah.
I would encourage us before deliberations to look back at Article 3 and the whole budget, because that March all day seems like forever ago now. But, you know, this is what Leon has put together, but maybe there's something that struck
Good
us.
point.
You know, in our presentations by each department, maybe there's something else that we might think of to add to this list.
That's an excellent point, and if we do that, if we go back as individuals, what I'd ask is you would communicate that directly to Leon and would copy me on it, so I have it and I can inform the other people, because that could be a way. I mean, it's an excellent point, because, again, the operating budgets, I mean, it's departments, many just operate, you know, it's how many pencils you're buying, how many paper clips. There are other departments that have a more robust budget and whatever. I mean, I'm just looking at it now, let's say with the OPED, 500,000, reflecting on what the impact on the average residential would be about $25 increase, give or take. I know last year we had $1 million, and that was roughly translated to about a $100 lessening of the average residential increase. But when the 500 was restored last year, it still affected it at 500. And we're talking tonight with the very good information about the option taxes that we have. That's introduced. So a $500,000 cut,
About $50.
$50.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, let me finish. So if we look at that, and then we go into some of the other options that Leon has presented individually, we can take a look at those to get that 50 up a little bit more. I mean, it's kind of crazy to be sitting and talking about this is worth 50, but the average residential increases of over 21% over the last 3 years. I think we have an obligation in what we recommend to town meeting to address those. That's just me. Did you? No. Okay, Michael.
Just clarification, if you do the math, it's actually 23%. You don't just add the percentages, you have to look at the difference between the first number and the last number. And it's because you're going doing, when you add percentages, your base keeps changing.
Compounds.
Yeah, it compounds, so it's actually even worse, it's 23% increase. I did the math, but just.
Thank you.
I'm not nitpicking, I just.
No.
It's even a little more eye-raising.
Yeah, mind repeating, I'm sorry, I don't know where I wrote it down. John, the number you gave us for the meals and hotel tax, so the revenue side, so we can think about that as well.
660.
660, thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. It's, the exact number would be 336.20 plus 327.375.
So those who went to business school can,
This number plus
a voice in the past, would you say, or back?
$663,395.
What did you say? Come up here, will you, please?
That's my Marine voice right there. I can get louder, too.
Make believe you're a drill sergeant, okay?
Oh, man. Bring back memories.
Yes.
The total growth would be $663,395.
Okay.
not to minimize the increase over the last several years, because I think it has been impactful to a lot of people, but it's important to keep in mind that during those years, because of the inflation and because of wage inflation too, our tax bill as a percentage of income has actually held steady for the last 10 years. So that, because incomes have been going up so much in town, the tax bill has been steady as a percentage of income as well, or actually I think it's slightly dropped from 10 years ago. But and so yes, it's become more difficult for those on fixed incomes and things like that, but as the majority of our working residents have seen their incomes go up a lot in the last several years as well. And unfortunately, some of them are our vendors, and so that's why we're paying them more, and then we end up having to tax, but that's just the way it works.
Plus than that, you kind of get into the issues of discretionary spending and different things, what folks are doing and return. And again, because they're, as I said a couple of years ago, town of Dedham has a tremendous amount of economic diversity. And, as I said, some people, I don't care what the taxes go up. Others, it affects their lifestyle. It affects their, what they're doing. So I don't know, again, salaries may have gone up in some areas, but in other areas they haven't. And folks, as we've heard, as we all have heard, and different areas that plus 21% in the last 3 years has had an effect. Kevin?
This may be too sort of complex to do on the timeline that we're operating on now, but given that we know we're going to be facing this again next year, the police and fire overtime budgets are almost $1.5 million, if I recollect. And my recollection of the chief's respective presentations was that the staffing situation that contributed to a lot of the historical stuff is considerably better. Or is getting better pretty quickly, if I recall. And that, has anybody done a deep dive, or can someone do a deeper dive as to whether there's anything that we could do to influence those numbers, just because of the magnitude of them?
We can take a look at that. It's very hard to predict and control those overtime budgets because they're driven by, well, certainly on the fire side, they've been driven by different things in the past. And currently on the police side, although we can run down more on the police side because we don't have minimum staffing. We can do a little analysis for you on that, perhaps, and give you some perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kevin, I think that's only true on the fire side. I think as
The staffing improvement?
As liaison to the police, they've got a much shorter list of candidates in the pipeline than ever in years before. And some competitive salary issues in surrounding towns.
Okay, thank you.
So what I'd like to have my colleagues do is take some time over the next couple of days, take a look at what we've been presented, formulate, and as Michelle pointed out, go back in our budgets with the presentations from each department, and formulate some areas that you'd like information or projected reductions in modifications to the increases, so that we can have that information and have it ready for next Tuesday. Mike
I
Emery?
assume we should also be looking at those things, not just in the operating budget, but operating capital items as well, with the things that we're funding with free cash, because that would have a more direct effect.
Go ahead.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Dockham had 3 questions at the beginning, and one of them, I think, I could answer.
Certainly.
But make sure I get it right. Related to the 2.6 million overages of the schools, and how does that get paid? Because that's actually our Article 6, right? So town meeting will vote on it. So there's line item transfers to fund additional expenses for the current year, and it's proposed to move from free cash. Some of it's already taken care of another way.
Not the full 2.6
Not the-
million, because
yeah.
they've balanced it internally first, and they tried to cover it from existing monies that they had internally, but and state aid as well. And then the residual, or the rest of it was, they're asking for free cash line item transfer.
So we'll make a recommendation on that as part of a larger article, and it will go to town meeting.
And to be clear, if town meeting didn't approve that, that would mean immediate reductions in their budget for it, because they would need to balance at the end of the year.
For the present year.
They cannot legally overexpend their budget. They've been dealt some extraordinary circumstances, so that's why they're asking town meeting to fund this. But if town meeting said no, they would balance their budget by the end of the year. Not be pretty, but
Well, it's what the realities are.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, are we going to talk about Chapter 70 comparisons too? Or do you want to talk about that another time?
Maybe in preparation for next Tuesday, because I believe we're set, we're set, yeah. We have on our agenda for that is deliberations, but we're not going to be starting deliberations. We're going to have a lot of questions and a lot of back and forth information that we need. I think the question you and I both have is, how much of Chapter 70, because you hear reports and read the newspaper articles and things like that, and even the House budget is proposing an increase in school funding, education funding. And the Chapter 70 comes through on the cherry sheet, correct? Mm-hmm. The town. How much of that money has been applied or is applied to the school department request?
So it doesn't apply directly to the school department request, because it comes in via the cherry sheet into the general fund. We can give you that number. The increase, there is still it's not an absolute wash. So there's still even if you were to apply all the Chapter 70 money to the schools, if you will, they are still asking for above and beyond that increase.
Furthermore, there's also the reduction. So if you had let's say it's the $10 million that comes in, there's also the reduction on the other side. So you're not going to see the $10 million hitting our budget. It's going to reduce out the expenditures from the state. So they may only give us 8. So there's a difference there too. It's not a one.
But we can give you that. We already calculated this, so we can give you that.
I think you and I are on the same page, because at the community meeting, there was discussion about Chapter 70, and there was a point made, I forget who, but if we got our additional Chapter 70, we wouldn't be looking at that large of an ask. And that's where there's some confusion in terms of, because people see Chapter 70 and they see it as education, but it doesn't go directly to school departments, it goes back to the towns.
And it's more, even though I understand it comes out of the same pocket, it's more the perception of what the increase the schools are seeking year after year compared to the Chapter 70 money that's brought in.
And Chapter 70 has been largely consistent for the last number of years. The proposed number for FY25 is significantly increased. I think it's something like $2.9 million more net than what it had been in prior years, which is a significant jump up, because again, as we talked about, like other state aid has increased, 3% per year or something like that. That's a significant increase. It's double-digit increase. But that's just the proposed number that came from the governor, and then we'll see as it works its way through the budget process. If that were to happen, again, it does go to the general fund. It's designed to fund education, though. So if we can show you what that net out would be and what their increase would be, backing that number out, assuming it comes through.
I think that's it.
That's a question
Is
you
that okay?
have.
I think so.
I think that helps us in terms of, and it helps the community understand how that process works. And again, state budgets, as you probably don't know until September, what the actual funding is going to be.
This is where like legal versus what people understand or perceptions are, like sort of get a little confusing because Chapter 70 money is those state monies that are meant for education. They're only legally obligated to be spent on education if you're spending below a certain minimum threshold. Because we spend above that minimum threshold, that's why it goes into the general fund.
I just want to get back to one point you had mentioned with people's salaries and things like that, but when they look at a 5 or 6 or 7% increase on your average residential tax, I don't know what people out there getting 6 or 7% raises. I mean, it's some that do and everything else, but it's just, as you say, it's some tied up in discretionary spending, but private sector, I don't know if certain areas are getting that much of an increase in terms of what their salaries are, and then everybody's insurance is going up, so.
I assume that statement you made is based on national data or averages?
No. That's based on data that we collect, and we can through DLS, or Department of Revenue, and so they break it down. So you can run these reports based on it's actually localized data. And Dedham's per household and per capita income has been increasing greatly over the last number of years, and as a result of that, it has.
So it's local, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or discussions? I think we have our homework to do as a group.
Did we answer Mike E's question?
I'm sorry.
I got a nod from those guys, just that when we're looking at things that we might propose here, individual items, that you also want to take a look at operating capital items, not just operating budget items, anything that's like free cash. Paper. Yeah.
Well, I think when we get to Article 4 during our deliberations, I think that's an area that, and again, I would propose that we go it line by line. And if we feel it's not, we do not want to fund it, or we do not want to recommend funding, then we can, that would reduce in some cases on the bonding, but that won't cut in for another year.
Right.
Debt service. And if it's a free cash item, free cash are, right now, we're talking about 200,000, 2 million, I mean.
Residual balance at the end of this time, about.
Right. And you're also one of, we had the discussion, I know I'm all over the map here, but the feasibility study, you're going to get back to us on terms of what the funding source was going to be for that, so.
I didn't know that, we weren't provided that information, so I was trying to listen to the information online as well. So, didn't have a lot of time to absorb that before providing an answer. Because of the dollar amount and just where it's coming from, I think still within free cash would be the smartest move as of this time.
And that would put us about $1.8 million, right?
I have a full list. If you guys should have a analysis in front of you. Hopefully it was provided. I printed it out. No? Oh. I have packets too, so hopefully I could run and grab them for you and hand them out.
That would be helpful.
But yeah.
Because if with the free cash, as we get into next Tuesday with deliberations and we're talking about Article 4, the free cash balance and...
I believe tonight we were talking, we have, it's on the docket for the agenda to discuss this anyway. So this is, if we want to discuss it at that time.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Sorry. You have a list of everything that's being recommended in the budget that's coming from free cash?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Okay, that's good. All right, at this point, we can move on to a discussion, public hearing on Article 8, which is...
She's got to run and grab the packets. So
Already done those, haven't we?
let me go make sure I don't have any.
Is there- Yes. Certainly. Right up. Didn't we already do this one? I thought we did.
Remember something else was getting moved in there?
Yeah.
Another article of IP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As moderator, I don't get into the debate about the value of different cuts or spending proposals. What I am concerned about, though, is the message to town meeting representatives, the information that they get before they go into the meeting.
And the reason I'm concerned about that is because that dictates how well the meeting goes, frankly. If there's a plethora of conflicting information, I mean, one thing I think we've learned over the years is that town meeting hates confusion. If there's anything that's confusing, they assume there's something wrong. So I'm picking up a little bit on what Michelle and Sarah said earlier, that I think we have an opportunity here to have the message, have the information out to them. We've got weeks before the mini-town meeting, and the message has the potential to be somewhat straightforward. Both the town and the public school department are pretty close on the number that they're asking town meeting. So that's kind of the first part. The wrinkle is that there's a little bit of difference between facility versus education. But then the question is, and again, this is only from a town meeting perspective, what does that really mean? Well, frankly, it doesn't mean that much, because as the chairman pointed out, school autonomy means town meeting doesn't get into the whole discussion of facilities versus, town meeting can't vote to add music teachers or add recreation staff to work at the Green Lodge School. They don't have that authority. So I think that if there are three parties here, there's the school, there's the town, and there's you. If there is a consistent message that can be kind of crafted by the time, certainly by the time of the Warrant Review Committee, ideally before then, and maybe even some kind of a joint statement or something that's put on the town webpage that clarifies what it is to be debated at town meeting. So we're not going to debate at town meeting whether the facilities should be cut in the education, but and that getting that message out, and the fact that there is a pretty high degree of agreement there. I mean, you can argue a little bit up and down, but compared to some other years, everybody has done their work and produced a budget that has pretty bipartisan, to use that phrase, bipartisan agreement. And I think that just kind of lowers the tone at town meetings so the debate can be intelligent and productive. And, 2 of the last 3 years we've had town meeting exercise its prerogative to override everybody. And that's what they're entitled to do. And that's fine. But I think that if we can get the message out there that there's essential agreement between the school and the town manager, and I'm saying that based on what I've heard tonight. I mean, the school may still want to weigh in on that statement. Then I think that we can focus the debate on town meeting on what town meeting can really do. They can't do the work of the town manager. They can't do the work of the school department. And then I think that sets a much better tone for town meeting. And I think it increases the confidence of town meeting representatives that everybody's kind of working together on this. But we want to get that message out, not on the floor of town meeting. It's too hard to do. To get it out there earlier, let it seep into social media a little bit, and arm people who want to have a good debate with the facts, so that if there are some inaccuracies at town meeting, there are people there who can counter it. So,
Liz?
Yeah, we totally agree, which is part of the reason, after watching that community forum,
yeah.
we were questioning this and need to be able to explain it ourselves so that
Yeah.
we can put it out. So we completely agree with you, and I think that message is separate from something else we're working on, which is we want to put the facts out both for the town meeting members and the town prior to town meeting, without a lot of editorial, no editorial, but here are our positions. We'll have to define terms so that people understand excess tax levy, et cetera, capacity, that sort of thing. But we're working as a committee on keeping it. It's a hard message to write because we don't know where we're going to land yet, but we intend to work on that together.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Right. I was hoping this could get in your hands before. I'm going to start with this side. If you just grab one and pass it on, and then I'll start on the other side. So you're going to have a couple of documents here. This first one is going to be the free cash analysis. I call it the preferred one, which is just
We're talking about E.
using one-time funding source for one-time costs. Very typical to what we've always done. That's the first one that you're going to see. And then I'll also have the S&P rating as well. So we just had the S&P rating call. Obviously, we had a bond sale that went out, resulting in a lower debt service payment. than anticipated originally, so that's good news for the town. The town of Dedham, the select board will be voting to absorb those tomorrow night at the select board meeting. One of the things that was articulated during that call was and inside of that report states that we will be using free cash to supplement the a hit to our liquidity, we'll just say. So we're going to hit liquidity for the school's operating budget this year. So one of the questions that came up during the call was specifically how were we going to handle, much like this gentleman's comment, how were we handling the budgetary constraints of the school? All that is being said because I articulated that we should be hitting a little bit of liquidity in this year, hence why the free cash position. So that's where we're getting back to the free cash question. So what you'll see here is the free cash analysis. The preferred is using all these articles, free cash, one-time sums, and that gets to the $4.8 million, which gets to the remaining balance of $1.3 million. If you flip the page over, another question was, what has it been in the history of, at this time, with free cash use to where it's going to be? So on the right-hand side, you'll see, starting left to right, you'll have fiscal year, the certified free cash, fall use, spring use to get to your I call it has to be anticipated ending balance, right? For free cash at the end of fiscal year. So on the right-hand column, you can go way back in time to 2016 and run yourself forward. Most years, since between $2 to $4 million is around where it ends up. There were a couple years sub $2 million, and one year was $837,000. And that we generate the free cash at the end of the year based upon operational correctness and taking in revenues over expenditures, things of that nature. So that's the summation of it. And so you can see that tying back into that original article, and what we're here to talk about tonight is that $660,000 that transfer in from free cash to general stabilization fund. I wanted to provide you another option, which is the next one I'm going to pass out, the fun stuff. It's just another option, and this is just an option. This is not the preferred option for me, but at the same time, it is an option. We'll start this way. The hat. I was homeschooled, so I'm not sure how this usually works.
And they let you carry a gun in the Marine Army.
I know, right? That's how high those standards were. I scored well on the test, maybe not the common sense portion, but the exam I did well on. So the option that you're going to see is one in which, and this was passed by council, we could close projects to fund as a source of funding for the general stabilization, as long as they were done through free cash or taxation, right? So they were raised, these are residual balances left over, and rather than closing them down to, and you're closing out projects, right, and then it would close out to free cash at the end of the fiscal year, you could vote to do this. It's just another option. So if free cash position was that, it was creating that much agita, heartburn for everybody here, I wanted to provide another option on the table for it. Hence why the first one is the preferred method, just straight 1-to-1, and then in the fall town meeting, we come back and close out across the entire board. But again, I wanted to provide that option because of the agita that was here for the free cash position at the end of the year, fiscal year. So that's this article. Again, this is just an option on the table.
Mike?
Yeah. So closing out these projects, how confident are you that there's no lingering invoice out there to come in?
I've walked through this with the departments. These are bold, as you can see. You were sitting on the Financial Policies Committee. We are looking at 5 years and older. So you can see that the newest ones are FY20. And again, those are just residual balances. So I'm highly confident that there's nothing really pending out there. Again, fall town meeting would probably be the better time to do a full-on article closing to free cash. So it would hit free cash next fiscal year. And that's why I let it out as well. My articulation to S&P that we were going to already hit a little bit on the liquidity, and they still provided that AAA rating saying, yes, this is good, they anticipate, blah, blah, blah.
Michelle?
I just want to make sure I understand.
Please.
So stop me when I'm wrong.
Yes.
So we need to, one way or another, get $660,000 in general stabilization in order to maintain whatever we've got to maintain.
That is correct.
And we were going to do that with free cash. But another option is that here's all these old projects that had been approved for a certain amount of money, and those things are not ever going to be spent. In the past, one of the things we've done with that is trade that into other similar projects. Am I still right? Kind of.
We can, so that is an option, we can transfer them to specific projects, just trying to keep it one-to-one, but it's better to just close the free cash and then vote new and just keep things in a cyclical format, rather than trying to muddy it up and trying to I don't know, gimmicky type of things.
So if we close the free cash, it takes care of, that free cash will take care of the 660.
You would be voting not to close it to free cash, you would have to vote it as a source of funds.
If I could add, we talked about this in the financial policy meetings, and it is the best practice to do this. I think John proposed that we do it anything 5 years or older. So it's violating that a little bit by having the FY20 projects, but if they're pretty certain that they're done, I think it aligns with that best practice that we talked about in the financial policy meetings.
So in the end result is that 660 gets taken care of, and we have a higher free cash balance.
The net outcome, just to provide a little bit of, if we're dropping down to what does that mean really? It just means, when does that liquidity hit which financial statement? Does it hit the FY24 financial statements and saying, oh, we have a little bit more free cash here and help us certify a little bit more for the fall? Or do we close out in the fall and help us certify a little bit more next year? It's really just, that's really what we're talking about here. Just to boil it just straight down to the end result.
And you're recommending which, like, what are the pros and cons here?
Again, I'm recommending just to hit the 660, I just do a nice clean article in the fall, closing out all projects straight to free cash in the fall. It would then recertify next fiscal year, knowing full well that S&P, which is the big thing on the back end, which is saying our credit rating, right, to make sure that we get bond ratings, they are already well primed and well understanding of where we're going and where we're going to be in this fiscal year. So as far as like having that financial impact on the end, I don't foresee it really doing that much positive at this present time as a source of funds. That's again why I said the preferred is just to hit the 660 for free cash.
So, in other words, let's say we use free cash for the funding of the feasibility study. Brings us down to about $1.6 million, $1.7 million, somewhere around there, right?
It's on the front of this sheet here. You'll see that Article 17, Oakdale feasibility, it's right, it's baked into that.
So it's 1.3. We carry that 1.3 in free cash till November. And in November, there's a warrant article to transfer this into surplus, and that goes into free cash.
Correct.
A to B to C.
Again, it's just options for the table. Recommending body, so I wanted to provide you options.
And this has been vetted with the bonding people, with the rating?
With the rating agency, as far as?
With S&P, that process has been vetted with them, or?
The process was vetted with Lauren Goldberg, as far as that being allowable, but as far as articulation of our liquidity for the anticipated liquidity at the end of this fiscal year, that has been vetted with S&P.
Mike?
So, again, just trying to understand, so effectively, is what we're doing is we're accelerating the movement of these closing into recognizing as free cash this fiscal year versus next fiscal year. So it'll also imply that this is access to things, free cash, that we're just not going to have next year that we normally would. So it becomes,
as Lauren said, it becomes immediate.
Yeah, $1 today worth more than So, real quickly, so I just want to be clear, so when if something is bonded, which most of these have been bonded,
None of these are bonded.
They were not bonded. These are capital projects, in many cases, that were not bonded.
These are capital projects not bonded either through free cash or through operating, raise and appropriate.
Which is why we can do this.
Exactly.
Okay,
Right.
I got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sounds good.
That was it?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Now, we had
Needs to stay there for 8 and 9, right?
Article 10, isn't it?
Which one's next?
That's 8 and 9.
I missed something? Correct, 9.
Was that 8?
That was 9.
That was
wasn't
9.
it?
That was 8.
Oh, okay, because I have 660,000 to bring percent to 5.36 on Article 9.
I didn't even know we were talking about an article. I thought he was just giving us some
I know.
information.
Oh,
Were you talking
See
about
from free
Article 9 right
cash?
then?
for the life of me, right now, I can't even remember which
So
article.
Article 9 is General Stabilization Fund, and we had notes about rainy day fund and recommending 660.
So that would be Article 9.
660, so
Because
that's
this is the recommendation to
Okay.
transfer into, for general stabilization.
So to pass this article is your option 1 or your option 2?
The,
I'm so
can you?
He said he preferred option 1.
I know
That's the
he did, but
preferred-
like,
oh.
what is this article?
I think it's,
I know, but is Article 9 to say yes to that? Is that option 1?
Yes, to move the 660 over, to bring the percentage to where it needs to be per policy.
But I think what he's saying, excuse me,
Sure.
is that we're going to vote to move free cash, Article 9, just do that.
Right.
And that he's saying, and behind that, the way we're going to maintain liquidity in our free cash is this additional thing which is going to happen in the fall.
Correct.
Right, so your option 1 or option 2?
Maybe I put it underneath the wrong one, but because Article 5 is the general stabilization funding, which is, I think, to your point. I might be talking out of line to Article 5,
Confused.
which is the general stabilization
Stabilization
funding.
fund, okay, it was 660 in free cash.
Right.
The 660 was sitting, as we
I
discussed,
thought that's what we were
Article
supposed to be
9.
discussing tonight was the general stabilization
No,
funding.
we were Article 9 was on the agenda.
Oh, my apologies.
Article 8 and Article 9 are on the agenda.
Right.
Oh,
So 9 has a 660, which you have on Article 5,
So
free cash only. So the free cash of,
Well, Article 5, we wrote there are none IP, is what we wrote last time that we talked about it.
Article.
Yeah, we already did that.
We've already done all of these.
yeah, I know,
But one of them that we did last time, you said it was because you had something else you were going to bring back to us.
yes,
I thought that was Article 9.
Which is what I was talking about.
which is,
Yeah, Article 5 is
Which is
outstanding
Article 5.
bills. I mean,
Yeah, it's not Article 5.
yeah, I think it's just a typo.
It's 9.
It's Article 9.
Right.
Article 9 says to see what sum of money the town will vote to raise and appropriate to transfer from available funds for deposit in the general stabilization fund or take any other relative action thereto.
and I have
Into the
660.
general stabilization fund.
Right.
So Article,
So what you have is Article 5, 660, should actually be Article 9,
should actually be Article 9, Article 6.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
On that.
That's the clarification,
Thank
right
goodness.
there. Minor typo on Article 9.
Okay, but
There we go.
it still doesn't
All
clear
right.
up for me. So regardless, if we say, now I think, based on what Mike said, is that if we say yes to Article 9, it still is going to happen either option 1 or option 2.
Correct.
We'll just feel better
That's our
about it.
choice or that's your choice?
I feel better about that. Thank you very much for finding that. Yes, Article 9, transfer into general stabilization, it is 660 for free cash, and the other one is like 658 something. It's on that sheet.
The
It's
closeouts.
very, 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 very similar. And with all the-
658, 21906. So in November,
No difference.
you will have an article to take this money
Yep.
and put this into
Free cash.
free
Closing,
cash,
it's going to just to close the
or with
appropriation.
the general fund, which will be applied to next year's free cash,
Correct.
right?
No, I thought you said it would go this year, free cash.
Yes.
He was talking about closing in the fall,
Okay.
not,
No, but closing out these projects
Yes.
for the amount of 658, 21906.
correct.
I believe you mentioned in November, they would take that money, it would be in a warrant article, close this out and transfer it into where?
Free cash.
Directly.
Free cash?
It doesn't, so a little clarification, this is a preemptive to fall. The article presented, when we close out any capital projects, bonded or otherwise like this, it closes to the general fund. So it's not something you just close directly to free cash, you close it out to the general fund, and at the end of the day, it should roll into. I need to be clear on that, and I apologize for the nuance of that statement, but it's not like I can just, I need to be clear that it's not closing directly to free cash, so that it's a one-to-one transfer next year.
It goes into the general fund.
Correct.
And then when, in the end of June, July 1st, the general fund, then whatever there, in most times, or in the totality, goes into free cash, correct?
For the next few months, there's a review and certification.
Right, but, eventually it's going to be part of our free cash balance that gets certified next October,
Correct, for the fall.
fall.
John Huff knew the answer, I can see it on his face.
It becomes part of the number that we submit on the application for the free cash.
Okay, all right. Now, does everybody understand? If you don't,
No, I'm gonna wait to see.
don't feel bad, because I don't be quite clear.
Your recommendation is that we say yes to this Article 9.
Yes, Article 9, 660, free cash.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. All I need to know.
And then we'll work out the machinations after that,
Yeah.
right?
That is my, I
So
wanted
this
to,
won't come up till the fall.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay. But we didn't do 8.
And 8 is, see what's up?
We did before, but do you have to do it again? Special Purpose Stabilization Funds.
Robin Reyes? That was the additional, requesting the additional funding out, I believe, from Robin Reyes.
So is there something that changed since we last met about that?
That's the one where we just got the additional.
I was going to say the anticipated deposits.
Yeah, that's why you asked to have that put on, so you
Yep.
could let them know that the additional money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote down the anticipated deposits
The meal.
based on,
This is the meals and tax.
Meals and hotels.
Which Leon did cover before, because
Yes.
I couldn't recommend before. March, the revenues hadn't come in, therefore I couldn't recommend additional revenues. As you heard earlier tonight, the additional revenues came in, obviously it pushes it downward on the levy.
So you were going to give us in writing, whatever, what?
You'll get that number as part of your motion for Tuesday when you start to deliberate. It'll include
Okay.
the additional.
Thank you.
money.
thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? And when you go to sleep tonight, the one thing you'd be asking is, what did I miss? But I think we'll work it out. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Under old new business, Mr. Heffernan? Our liaison to SBRC.
I will not be talking about any numbers. You've had enough tonight.
Thank you.
I requested to come in and talk with you under old business.
Right.
The reason for that is it wasn't directly related to Article 17, which was for the Oakdale project. It was based on the comments that were made at the end of your meeting with regard to the project. So really, the comments were more about the project and about what happened during the discussions here. What I wanted to do was to come back and clarify some points, give a little more context to you about the project, so that when you go to deliberate, hopefully it's a little bit more information that is helpful to you. Hopefully it's helpful to you when you deliberate. I'm also here to also demonstrate the fact that there is somebody out there who's listening to your meetings. So I was actually at home and I was catching the end of it, and I said, "What?" If I had known that you were going to be talking about it, I would have hung around. But I just want you to know, yes, people are actually listening. The first thing that I want to comment about was your frustration, as far as you were looking out and seeing there was frustration in the audience, and you felt that this was your first shot at really discussing this, and it really was, and that you should you should be able to ask questions, and you getting the feeling that you couldn't or shouldn't, and I would say, as a person who was involved with that article, no, you should be able to ask as many questions as you want, and you can talk as long as you want about it, and that is fine. So that is your job to do. So don't worry about that. Regarding the frustration that probably was in the audience, was probably, well, has to do with what we've had to go through over the past 6 months. And to let you know, the SBRC was moving along with a combined school. As a matter of fact, we came into 2024 still as looking at it as the combined school. The reason why, well, there's a couple of things happened. First, if I go back to October, there was a NESDAQ report that came out that showed that we did have an increase in the number of students that was going to be coming in to the district up through 2029. And it was a substantial difference from the previous reports that came out from NESDAQ. What the schools did, and this was something that we initiated, and it was on the school side, was to go back to the MSBA and ask them if this new report warranted a review and a potential increase in the numbers. So there was a period of time that went by that we were waiting to hear back from them. And then into 2024, we did. During that whole period of time, we were full on board with going with a combined school at Oakdale for 550. The reason why we looked to reconsider our choice was because we did not have the support out there that we felt was going to get us through town meeting. Now, knowing that, and this is now for Article 17. We went through a number of meetings through the summer, through the fall, into 2024, and we were getting pounded with people not wanting a combined school. I will tell you the SBRC, and I'll speak for myself, I wanted that. To take a step back, actually, I actually would have initially loved to have seen us find a way to get Oakdale and Riverdale together. I refer to that as the Holy Grail, if we could have found it. After looking at various sites, as a matter of fact, over 11 sites, we could not find a way to make that happen and work out. But we really wanted this Oakdale Green Lodge combined to happen. Just to give you an idea, the various groups that were opposed to the combined school at Oakdale for 550 was those who wanted to keep Green Lodge. They didn't want to lose their school. We had the group in and around the Oakdale area that thought 550 was too large. It would be too big a school, it's going to be too much traffic, so they were opposed to it. We also had those who believed in neighborhood schools. We should retain our neighborhood schools. And then there's the group that was no more taxes, and they're going to be there regardless. But the two other groups, two other committees, boards, that did not give us support was, first of all, the Select Board. The Select Board, actually in their statements, in their meeting, two of them opposed the project. One was on the fence. That's not support. We needed more support than that in order to move through. The other was the Planning Board. The Planning Board was very vocal. As a matter of fact, they were even much more vocal than the Select Board about it. And they weren't taking a vote on the project. That wasn't their purview, yet they chimed in. And they said they absolutely disagreed with this project. So now we had a dilemma. Do we march forward with 550 and run the risk of failing at town meeting on the 550, which would set us back years? Or now that we found out that we had new numbers, and particularly for Oakdale, which is 360, do we move forward with Oakdale at 360? 360 is a key number, because we did have 235. 235 previous, that's a non-starting number, because The current enrollment in Oakdale is 275. Something north of 300 was what we really, and we got 360. Now we have a discussion. Okay, do we go standalone or do we go continue with the 550? We actually have that as an option. We struggled with that early this year. We struggled with what to do. Personally, I'll speak now for myself. We had to go with the standalone. I think it was going to be way too much of a risk to try to move it through with all these groups looking to oppose it. And so the frustration part of it is when you were referring to the need for a combined school. Yes, that's our frustration. We have been living through that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second part, which I don't think was really the part of the frustration, but it's just the understanding, is our budget. Okay, and I get the feeling the issue is not so much with the 263,000, but it's with the actual project that's going to happen next year. Yes, and if you're against the project that's coming up in the future, yes, you're not going to vote for Article 17, because you're just thinking you're just throwing away money. However, I have to say that regardless of, excuse me for a minute, I'm talking too much. Regardless of this project, we have the issue with funding the budget and in the future. So this is going to be something that's going to be a continued discussion. The advantage of this project is that we are getting 40% reimbursed from the state. We're getting a substantial amount of money. So this is now a smaller project. We're still, on percentage-wise, it is still going to be the same percentage reimbursement of a lower number, because this school is going to cost less, but it's still going to be 40% of the lower number. And this is the less expensive alternative. However, and to make it clear, we're not getting 550 or 550 plus students in. So yes, if you were to look at cost per pupil, yes, we're not getting the better cost, absolutely. But I personally feel, and I'll just speak right now for myself, I personally feel that to move forward to town meeting, trying to get the 550 through, it was going to fail. And I have to tell you, we struggled for months on this. It was not a quick decision. I leave it to you for any comments or questions that you have.
Again, first of all, thanks, John, for coming in. And I think I've been following this pretty as closely as I could, but that color around the support you felt you were getting from the select board and that those decisions are helpful. I think we strayed I sensed the frustration. Obviously, we saw it, yesterday, all around. I went home last night thinking you got to cut people a lot of grace because it's been combat for the last year with what you folks have been through and trying to get the right thing done and get the best thing done and getting some consensus. But as far as Article 17, the 263, my point, I just said this is 1/2 of 1% of or less of the budget. You have a huge scope change in a project to have that much of a change order is really not consequential. So my point was, this is just, an obvious one, a no-brainer. But anyway, just want to thank you for coming in.
I would say that the scope of the project is not as large as is the requirement of the documentation to the MSBA. From a scope standpoint, you're taking the same location, very much the same design, and you're shrinking the building. What we learned was that, despite all that, there are sets of documents, and Dave, you're very much aware of this, that even though we did it before, we had to redo those documents. And that unfortunately is what needs to be done.
Anyone else? Michael B.?
I just want to thank you, John, for coming in today in a very matter-of-fact discussion, without the emotion for any of us. It's very helpful. It helps me understand it a lot better. I personally, I don't like the situation. I look at the long-term financial implication of this.
100% agree with you.
But it helps a lot in understanding, and, we don't want to be foolish and bite our nose to spite our face, and lose a lot of money from the state on this too. So we gotta be smart about this. So I appreciate you helping me understand that.
I just have to tell you, the only one emotion I had was last Sunday. Last Sunday afternoon, I hadn't received any questions from you. And I was panicking because I think it's worse for you not to have any questions and to be sitting in front of a quiet board. I did get questions, thank you very much, and I was able to get it to the people for answers, so thanks.
Liz?
Yeah, thank you not only for coming in and saying what you said, but also for being our liaison. I mean, we owe you for those meetings.
Well, in some ways, after listening to your comments at the end of the meeting on Monday, I was wondering, as liaison, should I have been giving more updates or providing more information? So as this moves forward, I'm going to be thinking about that. I'd like you to as well, and I can stop by more frequently.
If I can keep going, yeah.
Sure.
I have the same thought too at the end of that meeting. Should
Yeah.
we have been asking more in the process? And,
Sure.
because I was reflecting on what Michelle said at the end of the meeting about this is our first opportunity. And we wouldn't have had the full picture that we're looking at with excess tax, earlier in the process. I guess what I want to say is two things can be true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The process, you are where you are as an SBRC and a school committee because of everything, and I followed it very closely. And it's a hard pill to swallow, and those are both true at the same time.
It is. And next year, it's going to be another very difficult decision.
What's that? Michelle?
Yeah, on that same note, thanks, John, so much. I was thinking the same thing, like how did we get here that we felt like we were learning so much, some of us? And I think because when you were first on this committee, you were part of this board, right? So we saw you a lot more often.
Right.
And I think it might be a good lesson if we appoint someone who's not here,
Right.
that we invite you in more often to give us updates, because we probably would have been hearing more if you were still sitting with us.
I'm not on the board any longer, but I have no problem coming in and updating. The other thing is I could easily supply the minutes of the meetings. Maybe that is probably the quickest way of doing it, so that you at least have the minutes. They come out fairly quickly. And Anissa from our OPM group, Vertex, does an excellent job, a lot of detail, and turns them over quickly, so I'll offer right now to start with that and go from there.
And then the other thing, and there's nothing I think we can do about this, but I think a lot of us feel the way we do because we're looking at what's financially prudent, but knowing some of the people that opposed it thought they were doing what's financially prudent, is just frustrating, but I don't know how you get around that.
Everybody feels that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Anybody else? It's interesting, I thought about it the other night, I spent 3 projects on the other side. I was in the audience presenting to boards and whatever, and it's not easy, and this one particularly because of the highly generated public interest and folks that give up and had their opinions and put forth, and social network, et cetera. It was unfortunate, but we're at this point now where this group will deliberate, make a recommendation in terms of Article 17, and see what happens. I agree. I always thought about a combo school because of the financial implications. Our per pupil cost is through the roof because of what we have for our schools. But sometimes you got to look at what's going to be going on, so.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The other thing I've been thinking about is, whatever happens with standalone Oakdale happens, we'll still be looking at needing to get students out of Riverdale and Green Lodge.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things I was thinking about after the meeting, how do we get to a more, and I know that MSBCA, whatever it's called, has a, I was on their website today looking at their timeline and their communication and all the, the whole way it flows and half before too. But how do we as a town, not necessarily as a district, come together faster next time? So we're not in the same situation. Follow the process, public, and then looking at the finances. So I just throw that out for everybody in the room that I don't want to do it this way again.
Got it.
Michael? No, I think.
Everybody all
I'm
set
good.
up here? Sir?
Wasn't prepared for this, but thank you. I was on the other side of the project for a number of reasons. First being closing of the Green Lodge with no absolute plan for what would happen to the building. Second, obviously, the Oakdale School would not be able to accommodate the 550 with the traffic. I've been in other meetings since then, and they've talked about the traffic report was done. The traffic report was at best incomplete. The traffic report, the only thing that the traffic expert would put his name on was that you could get the students there safely. I was at the planning board prepared to discuss the traffic report. They would not present it to the planning board. I don't know if you want to go back and look at it. The company they hired, he actually said he would only put there safely, and putting students at a school in a safe mode is a very low bar to the impact that it would have on not only the Oakdale neighborhood, but the parents that were trying to get their students home or to the school. As far as the project also, it went through the warrant. I stood up and asked about removing the studying the combining from the Warrant article last Monday. The article went through as the Oakdale, if I believe, the original one for the $1 million. So people weren't involved and didn't read the fine print that it could possibly involve combining the schools together. Mr. Tocci came up and said that was probably much verbiage coming from the Mass Authority, that you had to use it that way or they wouldn't put you in there. That's the state dictating what the town could do, which upset many people. And as far as the 235 number that they would allow us to have, the root cause of that problem of 235 coming back when the enrollment was already at 275. However, that number, in one meeting, Mr. Tocci actually said it was a number that we provided to the state authority. Excuse me, I don't know the letters off the top of my head. Mr. Tocci said that was numbers that we provided to him. The 235 being provided when the absolute enrollment was already 275 should have caused the project to stop right then and there. And as far as, excuse me, I'm not a public speaker.
Take your time.
As far as the project goes, if you're the Warrant and Finance liaison, I wish you would start voting no on some of the extras when I started going to all the meetings and paying close attention. $16 million for geothermal. Not one person voted against it. That $16 million geothermal was only going to be warranted for 50 years. No one bothered to ask who was making the warranty for 50 years. They were putting in a full-service cafeteria. They were putting in a larger auditorium, gymnasium, to allow to allow bleachers, all very nice items to have. When you go into those extras, the Mass Authority removes it from the formula, and you're paying for it yourself directly. I could go on. I don't know which ended up with the AstroTurf that they were going to put on. That was another $2 million. I think I've said enough. But anyways, that's where the other side was coming from. And it wasn't just the fact that the magical number of 360 it came, that they finally said, okay, we can now do a standalone. I'd still be a little concerned about the 360 being safe, efficiently delivered to the Oakdale site. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a couple of points of clarification. The MSBA gave us the numbers. We did not give them numbers. Dave and others who know it, that's how it works. We don't give it to them. And if we gave it to them, there's no way we would have given them 235. As far as me being the one to cut the costs, we still have that to look at to cut. That's not over with yet. So that's the value engineering in this project. But I will tell you that I walked into this against geothermal, absolutely. I left it in there myself. I left it in there because the MSBA is reimbursing at a high rate to get us into getting out of fossil fuels and getting onto electric. And so there's actually even a better reimbursement on the geothermal than the solar. So we're looking at that right now. Did we make that as a final decision? No. But since there was such a great reimbursement for geothermal, great incentive, we've kept it in.
And just to speak on the language of the, had some experience dealing with the MSBA, and when they tell you this is the language you have to have in your articles, warrant articles, funding aspects of it all, you need to put that in because they're still giving, and part of their reimbursement is 40%. So you have to do what they request for their process.
So to that point, yes, that was their title, was the Oakdale project. We had a discussion about that and said, yeah, if we were to go back today, we would keep that as any of the reports with the MSBA, but we would look to have some other name for it, so not to confuse. However, I'll tell you in meetings, time and time again, we would show charts of the options. So the options were at the meeting, but yes, going back, if I was to go back again, I'd probably think up another internal title. The title that we work with on the MSBA, keep it as Oakdale. Yeah. But internally within Dedham, yeah, something more understanding.
Okay. Anyone else? Thanks, John, for coming in, clarifying some stuff, giving us an update. I would think that what you suggested is the minutes is probably the best way because, as you know, we might not meet that much at certain periods, times during the year, but if we get the minutes and there's any questions that any of us have, that would give us an opportunity to contact you to address it.
And that does happen. It picks up, it slows down. But it is year-round.
Sarah?
I just wanted to say, well, first of all, thank you. And also that the write-ups that appear in the paper, whoever does the write-ups, the submissions are very helpful. So thank you for those.
We have a couple of people that work on that, put that together.
Great.
And we also continue to struggle and strive to see how we can improve communications. I'll tell you, at the beginning, I thought we were over-communicating, and that's clearly not the case.
Yes.
But yeah, they do a good job.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else for John? Okay. Before we adjourn, just a couple,
Thanks, John.
thanks, John. You can stay for the rest of the meeting.
He's going to go home and watch it.
Glutton for punishment. No. Looking ahead, next Tuesday, we have our meeting. We have it posted as deliberations, but it's pretty clear that we will have the first part, some follow-up information, anything that folks here want to address, want to see, particularly on the information that Leon presented tonight. Again, directly to Leon, just courtesy, just copy me, so I have some idea of what's happening. I would hope at some point Tuesday, we would be able to close the hearings and go into deliberations. Again, a reminder, once we are in deliberations, we can only ask for clarification from folks. It's basically, it's us talking and then voting. Okay? And I think that's it. Any questions? Comments? Thank you all for your attention to this, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Not everybody wants to. Discussion, seeing none on the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good night. Thank you.